All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Calling for Historic Landmarks Commission, October 14th, 2020. We'll start with the roll call.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Heidi Rydell. I'll begin the roll call. Chair Grumbine.
Here.
Vice Chair House.
I'm here.
Commissioner Drury.
Here.
Commissioner Edmonds, absent. Commissioner Lenvik.
Here.
Commissioner Mahan, absent. Commissioner Uli.
Here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we're on to item A, public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for 2 minutes on any subject within our jurisdiction that is not scheduled in this agenda for public discussion. So, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you wish to speak on any items that are not currently on the agenda, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And that indicates to me that you wish to speak. You only need to click the hand one time. And a raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down, as shown in the bottom right-hand corner. And Mr. Chair, I don't see any hands raised at this moment. I would just like to ask Heidi if we received any written correspondence at this for general public comment.
Thank you, Ellen, and to the chair. No, we did not receive any general written correspondence for today's agenda. Thank you.
All right, back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, we're on to item B, approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting September 30th, 2020.
I move approval of minutes. Second.
Motion by Uli, second by House. Under discussion, any edits or changes? Or do we have perfect minutes?
Yeah.
All right, well, hearing none, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin the roll call vote. Commissioner Uli.
Yes.
Commissioner Drury.
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik.
Yes.
Vice Chair House.
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to item C, approval of the consent calendar for October 14th, 2020.
I move approval of the consent calendar. Second.
All right, motion by Uli, second by House. All right, Ms. Plummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item A, 214 East Delagara Street, received approval of review after final. Item B, 1334 Anacapa Street was continued 2 weeks. And item C, 524 State Street received final approval. Oh, and all items today were reviewed by Commissioner or Vice Chair House.
Okay, Vice Chair House, do you want to say anything about them? Or do you...
Not at this point, no.
All right. So with that, under discussion, any questions or discussion? All right. Let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll start with Commissioner Drury.
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik.
Yes.
Vice Chair House.
Yes.
Commissioner Uli.
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we are on to item D, announcements, requests by applicants for continuances and withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals. Right, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have 2 announcements. Commissioner Mahan and Commissioner Edmonds will be absent today. That does mean we are exactly at quorum. So we won't be able to lose anyone, hopefully, because because we need exactly 5 members for the whole meeting. So that's it.
Oh, darn.
That just means everything should be succinct, you know, in our review today.
Okay. All right. Other announcements?
And Mr. Chair, Ellen Kokenda, it sounds like from City TV, we're hearing that your audio quality is a little bit muffled. So I might ask you to go back to the other
Oh,
route.
darn. Okay. I'll get rid of this darn wireless. Okay.
Sorry,
I'll
I
switch
wish
to
it worked.
Old school. Okay.
I know, the trusted method. Thank you.
Okay. How's that?
Much better.
That's much better.
Okay. All right. So it was you guys who were saying it.
No.
I know.
All right.
I thought we could get away with it, but I'm concerned about anyone
No, for sure.
watching on
No,
TV
sure.
for sure.
Yeah, I sounded plenty loud to myself, so that isn't the requirement. All right. Any other announcements?
We need analog audio in a digital world.
Yes, that's what we need. I want a phone that I can, pick up and hold on my ear with a rotary. All right. Any other announcements? All right. Subcommittee reports.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, it's your house.
just briefly to announce that Commissioner Drury and I are meeting with Brad Hess and the 2 architects involved in the Plaza de la Guerra on site Tuesday at 10 o'clock to walk the site and discuss paving materials and whatever else comes up. That's
Great.
all I have to report.
All right, Commissioner Lendick, did you have anything? Okay. Any other subcommittee reports? It's not a subcommittee necessarily, well, it's not a subcommittee, but the Commissioner or Vice Chair House, Commissioner Drury, and myself all participated as at least giving feedback to some of the AIA, the AIA SHREC groups. We divided them into 2 and had 2 review teams giving some feedback on their projects. So that was this last week, and thank you both for your time and effort for it. And if you did want to say anything about it, feel free to. But HLC is gonna see we sort of saw everything, and HLC is gonna see a packaged version, a more concise packaged version of things because there was 16 different teams all doing different things. So there's going to be a packaged version that goes to gets presented to City Council, HLC, and everyone.
Mr.
Chair?
Yes, Commissioner House, and then Commissioner Drury.
I will summarize for the benefit of the other commissioners that you had divided the 16 teams into 2 sets of 8 and assigned them to our groups. And the last 4, I think, were State Street corridor, and they encompassed the entire length of State Street. And in hindsight, it might have been better if those had been split up between the 2 groups. But knowing that, after I met with my group, I today have been reviewing those, and so I will get my comments, the summary of the comments from my group to you later today.
Perfect. Sounds good. And there were and just so everyone knows, you'll see more of it, but there were some very good ideas, some very good and work well with El Pueblo Viejo guideline ideas, and some very clever solutions for things, everything from rehabbing things, using and working with historic resources, to building on new land, and then to repurposing and or changing big box stores or other things that aren't working. So it was great to see a lot of different ideas, and some of which were very strong. So anyways, that was. And anything else? Oh, Commissioner Drury, did you Want to jump in and comment at all?
Thank you, Chair Grumby. I just thought it was really illuminating, and I thought that the presentations were pretty concise, and I thought it was a very efficient way to look at these ideas. Pleased to be a part of it.
Good. Great. Thank you for volunteering. All right. Anything else, subcommittee or other reports? All right. So on to, can we go on to item 1?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're within the time.
Okay, great. All right, so on to item 1, 1512 Castillo Street Structure of Merit Designation, review of staff report and public hearing to consider a structure of merit designation of the Queen Anne style house constructed circa 1895. All right, is Ms. Hernandez?
I'm here. I am here.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This is a consideration for structure and merit designation, and I'll briefly go over the criteria that it qualifies for. Next slide. This is a Queen Anne style building constructed in around 1895 in the Queen Anne style. It is in excellent condition with almost all of its original materials and design still present. The porch does appear to have been modified from a wraparound porch to now it has a front porch and a side porch. And I have a picture of the Sanborn map that shows it as a wraparound porch. But however, that alteration does not substantially subtract from its ability to express itself as a Queen Anne style building. It also is on Castillo Street, and this section of Castillo Street retains many of the late 19th, early 20th century homes. So it does retain integrity of setting. So it does still retain enough integrity to qualify as a resource. Next slide. It qualifies for 3 of the criteria outlined in the municipal code. It is as noted, a Queen Anne, and the Queen Anne is a sort of culmination of Victorian tastes with few styles of architecture, allowing for the exuberant level of detail found in the Queen Anne style. The manufacturers at the time were able to distribute these ornate columns, spindlework, and elaborate shingles that adorn these Queen Anne houses throughout the country and in Santa Barbara. And as a good example of a Queen Anne style, it qualifies under criterion A as important to the heritage of the city. The next slide. I just added this here because it does show up on the bird's eye view from 1998 drawing where there's only 3 little houses on that side of the block on Castillo. And next slide. The building, here's the 1907 Sanborn map, which shows it with a wraparound porch, and it's in your staff report as well. The building exemplifies the following character defining features of the Queen Anne style: the asymmetrical massing with complex intersecting steeply pitched roof forms. The triangular shape of the gable is filled with the rectangular cut patterns of shingles, and it also has a wide cornice band between the first and second floors, and the windows feature elaborate divided light glass. Very for 1/1 double hung with the upper sashes filled with different stained glass window borders, as well as the porch. The porches both have ornate spindles and spandrels, and it does have also a low ashlar cut sandstone wall aligning the streetscape. And next slide. Just some more photographs of the building. It's kind of hard to photograph with all the hedge work, but it does embody outstanding attention to architectural design, details, materials, and craftsmanship. With the shingles in the gable, the divided light windows with the upper sashes with stained glass, as well as the sandstone wall on the front. Next slide. And so this was I did find an older picture of the house from Google several years ago where the hedge is a little lower and you can see more of the details, but the house may qualify for structure merit designation as it retains historic integrity and meets criterion A, D, and G. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you. All right, now we'll go to public comment. Member of the public wishing to comment on this item? All the
Thank you,
instructions.
Mr. Chair. So if you wish to speak on this particular item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. Again, you only need to click it one time, and a raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down. And I see Mr. Richard Clausen. I have just unmuted you. It looks like your microphone's live. You have 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I just have a question about whether, or what is the height of the hedges around the property? Are they within the allowable heights? That's my question. Did you hear me?
Yes, we heard you, and just wanted to know if you had anything else that you wish to say at this time.
No, I think it's a fine example. I'm not fond of the color palette, but I think it's a fine example of the type.
Okay,
Okay,
Great, thank you.
so much. Oops. And it looks like that is the only hand that was raised. Let's see, Heidi, did we receive any written correspondence about this project?
Thank you, Ellen. And to the chair, no, we did not receive any written correspondence on this item.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
okay, thank you. All right, so we will go back to the commission for questions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Drury.
Yeah, this is a question for Ms. Hernandez. So is that color combination, is that kind of part of the palette of that particular era?
They did do a lot of earth tones because most of their colors were made with natural pigments. And I have color books of Victorian colors, and it could have been. I mean, the thing you don't see is the bright colors of like the Pink Ladies in San Francisco. They weren't bright. They were all sort of muted. You know, just then,
Yeah.
like now, people had their own color taste. So, but that, I think those could have been colors from the Victorian
Well,
era.
I respectfully disagree with Mr. Clausen. I like that color combination quite a bit. I think and that somebody's obviously taken a great deal of care with that house, and it looks really lovely. It looks intact. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other questions? I'll throw a question in there regarding the hedge. What are the rules of engagement for a hedge discussion in the neighborhood, and what's the city's take on things?
So,
For the public information.
you know, when we do a designation, we don't use it to trigger an enforcement. The designation is triggered because they came in for a project, at which time they would have been evaluated to meet all of the zoning criteria. Pilar, can you expand on that?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Hernandez, and through the chair, as Nicole said, there is a project currently in the works. And as part of that project, they are requesting a minor zoning exception for the fence height. Hedges are allowed to go to a different height than fences. Fences along the front lot line are limited to 42 inches unless they receive a minor zoning exception. So that did go to HLC for comments. They did receive positive comments on the fence height at that time, and it will be coming back after staff hearing officer review for an official decision on project design approval and final approval.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other questions? All right, roll in any comments? Comments and motions?
I'll move staff's resolution to designate 1512 Castillo Street as a structure merit.
I will second that.
All right, motion by Uli, second by House. Under discussion? Discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin the roll call vote. We'll start with Commissioner Lundvik.
Aye.
Vice Chair House,
Aye.
Commissioner Uli,
Aye.
Commissioner Drury,
Aye.
Chair Grumbine.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, are we on target for our item 2? Yeah, okay. So item 2, discussion, visioning the future of downtown State Street, discussion item. So this is the Historic Landmarks Commission is requested to discuss and provide input to the State Street Subcommittee on the future contributions and community outcomes of a redesigned State Street.
Apologies, Mr. Chair. I don't believe the applicant is present yet. It looks like we're 10 minutes ahead of the item, which is within our start time. But I'd ask that we recess for about 5 or 10 minutes just to get the applicant in here. Okay?
Yeah, no problem. Or we can just start the presentation with Adam and we'll just wing it.
I know. All right, thank you.
Those always go well.
We
All
gotta
right,
just-
so yeah, let's recess for 10 minutes. Historic Landmarks Commission, and on to item 2, visioning the future of downtown State Street. This is a discussion item. The Historic Landmarks Commission is requested to discuss and provide input to the State Street Subcommittee on the future contributions and community outcomes of a redesigned State Street. All right.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Chair and fellow commission members. My name is Jason Harris. I'm the city's Economic Development Manager. I'm going to kind of start off with the introductions, and then Mr. Rob Dayton, Transportation and Parking Manager, will join and walk through this presentation. I wanted to take a moment just to kind of set the background, set the table, as it were, of context to why we're presenting this item and really the context of this item. So as you all are all very aware, we are working and living through a pandemic that initiated, well, obviously earlier this year, but really impacting the community dramatically on March 19th, when the governor issued a stay-at-home order, effectively closed all but essential businesses, all civic, academic, and cultural activities throughout the community, schools, and the such. We were really at a loss as to what to do. The city was at a standstill in all sense of the word, both impacting civic life and economics for both the city and the business community at large. Obviously, countless tens of thousands of employees impacted throughout the workforce, impacted throughout the community. We engaged the business community earlier this spring, April into May, to brainstorm as to ideas as to how to facilitate business reopening. At that point, we were still at stay-at-home. There was really no change to stay-at-home orders in all effect. And through that effort, there was a recommendation to the council to allow for temporary outdoor business activity to be facilitated. At that point, we knew that having outdoor activity was a safer type of environment than indoor. All indoor and business activity was restricted. And then similarly, through that action, there was a request and recommendation to close State Street, both to create kind of a public promenade for social distancing for pedestrians, as well as to facilitate temporary outdoor dining uses thereof. That went into effect through an emergency economic recovery ordinance that the council adopted in late May, and then that went into effect, at least the State Street closure and the suspension of all rules and regulations there in late May to facilitate that activity, obviously one in downtown, but then obviously throughout the city for all other business activity. And that was temporary. We initially set the term for September 8th to carry through the summer and just past the Labor Day weekend, not knowing necessarily how stay-at-home orders, public health orders were going to be amended at that point. As we went through the summer, there was additional change. They actually started reopening business sectors, but then in July rescinded those and restricted indoor business activity again. And at that point, we were realizing that this pandemic was not going to be a short-lived, short-term economic, public health condition, that we were in for a longer term, as it were. And as such, there was a recommendation, and council adopted a modification to the emergency ordinance to extend that till December 8th, and then add a 3-month option to carry forward to March 8th, to just anticipate potential public health conditions remaining in place. And that's where we're at today. Concurrent to those actions, not necessarily specific to pandemic, the council was also evaluating kind of the land development recommendations that the city's been studying through the NOVAC outside auditor review process. And they formed 2 subcommittees of the council, one a land development team subcommittee, but then also a State Street subcommittee. And we've been working with those 3 members of the council for the past month and a half. They recently gave authorization and direction for this staff to initiate a visioning outreach effort to conceptualize the future of State Street. As I've referenced, the conditions in place now are all temporary, and are expected to be temporary for the foreseeable future, and would, in concept, would go back to normal. And as such, the council is very interested in studying the future possibility. And you're one of about 17 commissions, committees, and stakeholder organizations that we're having kind of formal visioning sessions with today. And concurrently, we're going to be rolling out here in the next few weeks a public survey that won't be a binary survey as the IA charrette process facilitated of yes, no, State Street closed or not, open for bikes or not. No, this will be kind of similar in format of what we're doing today, which is more thematic perspective and really visioning. And so, we're going to kind of think outside the box. We're really not necessarily looking for design suggestions or input today. This is more experiential feelings, thoughts, and ideas. And Mr. Dayton's going to walk through a series of slides, photos of both the evolution of State Street over time, but then also different perspectives of other pedestrian promenade spaces around the country and in the world for perspective. And then we're going to have these ending 3 questions that you saw in the staff report to kind of end the presentation and queue each of you all up to kind of walk you through those kind of future visioning questions. So one, I'll end my comments there. 2, I'd like to thank you all for your service to this community. It's just a hallmark of the community, of your hard work and dedication to ensure the incredible architecture and design that we have in the community. So I want to recognize that and thank you for that. I'm going to be in the background taking notes, and with that, I'll transition to Mr. Dayton to walk through this PowerPoint presentation and facilitate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, Mr. Chair and commission members. Although this is the same presentation we'll be giving to everyone, you will be very familiar with some of the history, so it's wonderful to have people who know what they're looking at. The first slide we start off with, it would be the next one, is on State Street, pre-1900s. State Street has changed throughout history multiple times. This one has dirt, wood sidewalks, the Victorian era, as you are all familiar with. The mule-drawn cart with the first multimodal bike rack on the back for the big wheels. And of course, the big wheel clubs were the ones who motivated the first paving of the streets on State Street, complaining that the mud was not a stable surface for them. Next slide, we go to about probably 1924. It's before the earthquake. It's after the Granada Tower was built. You could see I'm sure you're delighted to see the original marquee that you helped restore in front of the Granada. This would be the intersection at Anapamu and State Street. But that mule car has been upgraded to a two-track system for the trolley car that went up to the Mission, and you can see the wires. And then as you move forward to the next slide, this would be post-earthquake, and the Mission revival, the Spanish revival architecture is well underway. I think the thing that most people don't know in our town, and you probably do, is that the way I learned it in the 90s from hearing stories is that that the earthquake was the creation of the vision. It wasn't until I told many years ago I found out that wasn't true, that actually Bernard Hoffman, who came in 1919 to our city and bought the De La Guerra house, and he had a vision. Dr. Sampson saved his daughter from diabetes, and I suppose he wanted to give back to the community, and he built El Paseo as a demonstration project prior to the earthquake, as a way to say, hey, Santa Barbara, you should be a Spanish revival town. Your roots are in a Pueblo format. And he actually passed the building code that favored Spanish revival before the earthquake. I think it was within weeks of the earthquake. Had a hand in designing the city hall and making sure that happened. He had a hand in moving De La Guerra Street, the odd section, the East Block 0 and 100 in front of the De La Guerra house, which just awesome history that I love talking about. But what happened is the earthquake accelerated the vision he already had, which is kind of the important part of that story. And then as we move out, you can see the Santa Barbara Inn. here. This is the intersection of Coda and State Street. The overhead lines are gone for the rails. They're not operating anymore. And then as we move along to the next slide, we enter the 50s. You could see this in the background is Haley and State Street. And you can see many of the familiar buildings with different names, obviously, and then more on the left are not there as much anymore. But we move to the next slide, and then we can see here's State Street, 1964, bustling at Christmas time. We no longer put the Christmas trees in the middle of the intersections. We only have one big one left, but that's the way it was done. And they were right in the middle of the intersection. You can see the Granada Tower in the background. You can even see some lights across the street, bustling. But actually right before here, the next earthquake, I'll say it, not a seismic earthquake, but an economic earthquake was about to hit. Next slide shows that economic shift, which was La Cumbre Plaza. La Cumbre Plaza built with one of the first outdoor malls in California with ample parking around it. Something you don't see very often is all the parking spaces taken. And in 1967, La Cumbre Plaza grossed more retail sales than all of downtown. And the people of downtown, the business leaders of downtown, acted extremely fast to be in response to, if you look at the next slide, to react to this outdoor mall experience where the retail's on the sides and the vegetation's in the middle. And the next slide shows what they did in respond to it. And so from the Granada Tower, looking down State Street, Woolworth building there, next slide shows the unheard of, the political will to actually tear up the entire street, to reform it into a plaza, which is actually what it's called, the State Street Plaza from Ortega to Victoria. Next slide shows that construction project in the rails finally being taken up from the street, from the center. And the next slide shows the park-like setting and transformation that plaza created. What a lot of people don't know about this story is that the plaza is actually named after La Cumbre Plaza in competition, kind of an odd thing that State Street would be emulating a new suburban mall in the name. Next slide shows that original texture that we had on State Street, actually still in front of Peterson's Place in the 1100 block, that stamped concrete, colored concrete, and some of the older furniture aspects of the street, the planters that are no longer there. Next slide shows that what we're at pre-pandemic, which is sidewalks on both sides, bike lanes. We even had 2 lanes of traffic, right turn lanes, and a shuttle, a electric shuttle, which that's the beloved shuttle. The new shuttle is not so beloved, or not so, it doesn't have quite the look as the older one. But that's where we were at. And then what happened was the third earthquake I would propose hit. This earthquake was both of economic portions and then a pandemic portion. And so before the pandemic, we saw an exodus. We saw a lot of competition for customers with the Funk Zone, and downtown definitely started to dry up. And the next slide will show us what happened in the pandemic, which is completely ironic that this place, State Street, could be so economically derelict in a way, and then in the pandemic, we're worried about safety, become one of the hubs of activity for the city again. And of course, this is the 500 block. This is a very, very typical for the weekend. It did start quieting down a little bit. I noticed this last weekend. But that's where we've come. And so as Mr. Harris talked about, the council's at kind of a crossroads. A lot of people are saying we should do something, and now perhaps in this earthquake 3.0, so to speak, is the time to redesign the street. That's why the Future of State Street Subcommittee, Council Subcommittee, was formed. So the question that we've been asking everybody is, to the next slide, is what is now the time? Is now the time to look at this street and see if it should once again transform into something other than it is now the time. So we have a series of questions we're going to ask you, but to stimulate your thinking, which is always fun, we're going to go outside of Santa Barbara. And next slide, we're just going to go to some American cities and then maybe some European ones too. So we spend a lot of time here in slides on Pearl Street. This is in Boulder, Colorado. You can see they have mainly passive space in the middle, sidewalks on the side, outdoor dining some in front. You can see the art. Next slide shows a more of the bronze art and the animals, kind of more of a natural Boulder. Of course, that is the name of the town. Look and feel with pine trees. Next slide shows the center playground pieces, so places for kids. Next slide shows another aspect of Pearl where there is places where you can boulder, get on the boulders, and then next slide, some kids, but then also some passive fountain, splash pad, where the community can engage on the street actively to create an experience. Next slide shows that there is impromptu entertainment going on in front of the kind of the famous kiosk of the street. And the next slide shows that there's also more formal entertainment going on. When you look at those tulips in the foreground and you see the well-manicured flowers of this street and plus the staged orchestra, you know that there is also a lot of money going into the street from a management standpoint. It was not just the construction, but the ongoing management of the street to make sure that it is a nice place for the public. Let's move, next slide would move to a different town. This would be, I believe, no, same one. This is converted to Pearl Street and on the weekends, some convertible space for merchants to come in. Next slide is Denver in their Plaza Street that's been redone. They actually retained the multimodal device, the bus in one direction. You can see the tire marks across the intersection. Vegetation in the middle. Pedestrians wandering throughout, either in the park-like setting in the middle or on the sidewalk, and then you can see where the restaurant space is on the right. Next slide is, I believe, of Charleston. Yes. Passive space in the middle. There's some restaurant in the middle, sidewalks on the sides against the buildings. The next slide shows that same space during Christmas time. With the Christmas decorations, they have a brick pattern, brick textures with iron. See the iron ballers and chains, and you can see some wayfinding in there. Next slide, we go to the 3rd Street Promenade. Interestingly enough, the 3rd Street Promenade was first closed in 1975. This is 3 blocks in Santa Monica. It actually did very poorly. And the project you're looking at now was constructed to bring back cars on either side of the fountain, to bring back cars to the street. And then it became so popular, they had to eliminate the cars again because it was redesigned space. The next slide shows that in the evening. You could see the drainages in the middle for this particular design. That still has curb and gutters. Of course, it was designed for cars to return, which are no longer there, and the sidewalks on the other side and passive space with interspersed, and as well as restaurant space. You see the lighting. And then going outside of the United States, the next slide, we go to, actually no, this is other elements of play elements, other art elements that you might find in those spaces. And then the next slide, I believe we go to Barcelona. This is La Rambla. This is a very open space from the city center to the waterfront. It has single vehicle lanes on the outside. You see where the canopy is of the sycamore trees. It has some passive seating. And then the next slide shows how La Rambla can change into something else. Businesses come out onto the street and it can contract and come together based on what the city needs are. Next slide shows Avignon in France. This is very similar to the 500 block. This has sidewalks against the building, which you can't see, and then the restaurant spaces, and then the internal space, which is a pedestrian way without bikes. The next slide is, I believe, Nîmes in France, which is a sister city to Avignon. This is South France. This particular This particular street is a very formal pedestrian promenade with a water element that cascades down it to the train station. So it's connecting the train station to the city center. A very formal tree placement and lighting placement, and a small road to the left. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so these are new ones. I think this is Edinburgh. I think this is Scotland. And this is actually a slide that came out of Sheila Lodge's travels. She produced a little book. I think she shared it with you about the different places she's been and her imaginations of potential places for State Street. Next slide. And I believe this is in Copenhagen. And open space, this is a rather long one. I think this is actually 1 mile and 1.2 miles. You can see the texture is kind of a stone tile looking thing. It's very open. Definitely a convertible space that's used to contract and expand as the events are wanting to do that. You see the gathering place is the square where the fountain is. It does accommodate all modes aside from vehicles. You can see in the foreground some of the pedicabs that go about this pedestrian space. And then the next slide. We're in Amsterdam, and you see the bicycles are integrated with pedestrians, although you see the little curb space there and the different color texturing, and then place for bicycle parking with the restaurant spaces against the building. Next slide. We'll show another place in Amsterdam. This is a street where vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists use the State Street. It's a little smaller than State Street. State Street's a 60-foot right away. This is much smaller. And then restaurant space is on the edges. Very little plantings. Next slide. We see another place in Amsterdam, and this one has the bike path on the right, vehicle lane, one direction on the left, and then parking for both modes in the middle, sidewalks on the outside, with awnings over restaurants and the vegetation sprinkled throughout. Next slide. So what we want to do to stimulate and get the subcommittee your input on what this board and actually you as individuals are thinking about the future of State Street, we're asking everyone these 3 questions to start on the conversation. So we would love to hear individually. This is not something the board needs to decide as a whole. This is actually a very individual discussion where you're telling us the answers to these 3 questions. What we're doing is we're developing key themes that we're hearing again and again and again. And perhaps the themes that rise to the top that are more pronounced, and bringing those to the subcommittee for their direction. So the first question is, what do you believe is the reason for redesigning State Street downtown at this time? Or do you believe it's the right time to redesign State Street? Is that even a thing? And if State Street is redesigned, so if we went into the future, it's redesigned right now, we're in the future, describe what's going on when you visit. What are your experiences when you get there? And then the last question, what role does a redesigned State Street play in the vitality of downtown? We've been talking about as a city, much like Bernard Hoffman was talking about a new vision for downtown. We've been talking about this for about 6 years. The pandemic is, like the earthquake, is probably going to be an accelerant for that vision that has already been hatched. So what role would a redesigned State Street play in your vision of a future downtown that is vital? And then what are your goals for State Street specifically? So Mr. Chair, we are here to take notes. I will be taking copious notes and just listening. And then if, Mr. Chair, if you will, if I might ask a follow-up question of the people who are sharing, just to get a little bit more about what they're saying, to articulate it better, if that's okay. So we thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Okay, so let's go to public comment now. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this item, please raise your hand by clicking the icon.
If you wish to comment on this particular item, please raise your hand. You just need to click the hand on your GoToWebinar control panel one time. and that indicates that you've raised your hand, and it'll be a red arrow pointing down if you have a raised hand. And I see Mr. Sweeney, you have your hand raised. I'm going to unmute you. If you could please unmute yourself. I just sent you an unmute request, or you can, there you go. You have 2 minutes whenever you're ready, Mr. Sweeney. And it sounds like we don't have audio. I see that your light is green, but I'm not hearing you just yet, Mr. Sweeney. Let's see. Do you have headsets plugged in, or are you calling in by phone?
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yes. Okay.
Sorry, I had a headset in.
That's all right. Please go ahead. You have 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
Okay, Mr. Chair, members of the board, just 2 quick questions and 2 comments. This is to Alan. How many folks are listening? Just to know how many people are in the room today. Do we know?
Mr. Sweeney, we have 8 on the webinar, but of course, that doesn't indicate if we have more watching on City TV.
Okay, thank you. And then this is a question to Mr. Dayton. He can answer it at any time. And working on the scaled photographs of State Street, all 10 blocks of it, I counted 80 feet between building face to building face. Does the 60 feet he alluded to, is that the right of way? And then 2 comments. One is on the photograph you're using of Lacumba Plaza. That's actually somewhere after 1980, having designed the building at the corner of State and Hope. I know that didn't exist until after 1980. So I know that the plaza occurred in 1967. So just to get the date of the photograph correct. And then as you deliberate the big pictures of State Street, two things to think about. One is pageants, how we use State Street traditionally in our history for fiesta, for solstice, for Christmas, etc. Do we subvert that to other streets or not? And then the final comment is the steepness, or not the incline of State Street as you travel from Gutierrez Street to Sola, which is the 10 blocks I studied. One of the things that's interesting to me is I wasn't able to go to Paris until I was 50 years old. So I was a little late getting there, but what really surprised me is I never envisioned it to be uphill and then have to hoof it up to the Arc de Triomphe. So think about how we maneuver, have tourists maneuver, other folks maneuver up and down that street. Thank you so much for the ability to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, Mr. Chair, I'm going to call on Mr. Richard Clausen. And Mr. Clausen, it looks like your microphone is ready, so you have 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Ms. Kukinda. Before I start, I'd like to just mention that you've situated your own camera such that you have a halo behind you. It's quite effective. I just want to comment to the to commissioners that other cities may have gotten to their promenades in different ways, and even though many of them for the same reasons, the same economic vitality reasons. I found that Mr. Dayton's slides were illuminating. I enjoyed them all and had seen very few of them, and I thought that they were great examples. I do want to remind or follow up on the path by which we have our State Street and our EPV, and that originated, of course, in 1959 when the state legislature allowed the city to designate landmark districts. And so that's what we are dealing with now. I don't know what they're dealing with in Barcelona or in Amsterdam, but you have a very small tract of property that is a landmark district. And so it might be very different than what was seen in some of the other images. Initially I didn't notice many bikes in the images, but later on there were many, although I didn't perceive that any of them were e-bikes or shared bikes or bikes that had stationary docks. There were some bikes that were locked on bike stands and whatnot, but not similar to what the recent proposal for e-bikes was. And then I thought there was an important missing question to be asked, and that is, how can the vitality downtown be sustained by attracting locals who will come even when it's raining or the weather is not so great, not just tourists who sometimes can follow the sun? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And then, Mr. Chair, that was the last hand raise, but I will ask if you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon and I will call on you. Heidi, did we receive any written correspondence about this item?
Thank you, Ellen, and to the chair. We did receive written correspondence for this item that was distributed to the commission prior to this hearing.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, I don't see any other raised hands.
All right, great. In that case, we'll take it back to the commission for comments, questions and comments. We'll just kind of roll it all together, thoughts. And maybe we can, just to kind of keep things in a orderly fashion, why don't we go down the line and everyone weigh in on their current reactions and then maybe have a little discussion afterwards, so that we don't, that way we can facilitate a little discussion and everyone can still get their opinions in on it. All right. Someone want to lead it? Commissioner House, do you want to kick us off? Or Vice Chair House?
Oh, I guess I could. Thanks for the great presentation, Rob and Jason. First of all, I've always been an advocate for closing State Street and doing something different with it. And I know that for a long time, there were a lot of merchants who felt that they really depended upon people driving down State Street to see their places of business. And I think this has quickly proven that that's not necessary and that getting the pedestrians onto the street is the equal of that or better. And we have not as many businesses open as there were back in the day. I view what's going on right now as the experimental phase. Obviously, it's the Wild West. I mean, everybody's scrambling and doing whatever they can to pick up where their business left off at the beginning of the pandemic. Seems to me some of the parklets are on 2.0 already. You know, they opened one, on a shoestring and saw the benefit of it and are already remodeling or expanding them. So it's kind of like an artist's canvas. We just throw things at it and see what things go together and what don't. It's an experimental phase, as I say. And, I have some pretty strong feelings about certain things, as you well know from a recent hearing. And mentioned for most of your domestic and European slides, if you saw a bicycle at all, it was parked or being walked. And it wasn't until I think it was Amsterdam you got to, which has always been very much a bicycle culture. And there's a strong bicycle advocacy group in Santa Barbara. I am not aware that there's such a strong pedestrian advocacy group. I personally have had numerous negative experiences with bicycles zooming down State Street while I'm dining outside. And I think that's something that really should be probed in future surveys, because there are a lot of people that don't come downtown to dine right now because they're still too frightened of the pandemic. So, I think we really need to find out the people that are spending money on State Street, how are they feeling when bicycles are whizzing by them? I do want to tell you about an experience that I had. The signs that are currently on State Street say the speed limit for bikes is 5 miles an hour. Well, how many people really have a sense for how fast is 5 miles an hour? So I Googled, what walking speeds were, and a fast walk is 3 to 4 miles per hour. I'm a fast walker, so I decided to time myself. I walked a couple blocks, each one is 1/10 of a mile, and I was able to determine that I walk at 4 miles an hour. So then I went walking up and down State Street, waiting for a bicycle to pass me. The first one was a tandem bike going just uphill and just a little bit faster than I was. So they were going about 5 miles an hour. They were going the speed limit. Then I saw another bike coming and I thought, okay, I'm going to time how long it takes him to get from crosswalk to crosswalk, and then I'll time myself. So it took me twice as long. So that tells me he was going easily 8 miles an hour. One day I was having lunch on State Street and an electric bike, and those things can go just as fast uphill as they can go downhill, zoomed by me easily going 25 miles an hour. So, you know, I've done some of my own research about bicycles and pedestrians together in Europe. You know, my recollection from European pedestrian plazas is you don't see bikes, and sometimes you see signs prohibiting bikes. But there are a lot of mixtures. But generally, either you're supposed to walk your bike or you're not supposed to go measurably faster than pedestrians are walking. And, you know, I think that is something that needs to be emphasized. Otherwise, there are going to be clashes. I already know people who have gotten hit by bikes on State Street. And it's certainly not a place for demonstrations of bicycle acrobatics or on bikes or on skateboards. I think, you know, in terms of vision, I think eventually there ought to be bike lanes on Chapala and Anacapa, which are absent right now. And it's all part of a bigger picture of, you know, as we reduce the reliance on cars, there will be fewer cars. Maybe we need to provide more parking so we can get them off the street and we can dedicate more of Chapala and Anacapa to bike lanes. But, you know, bikes want to get somewhere and feel the wind in their face, and it's just not appropriate to do that on State Street. So, you know, I'm all for what we're doing here, and I think that we need to have a long-term vision. I don't know what that background noise is, but, you know, there are people that were concerned about the new string lights that are going to be installed on State Street and whether or not the HLC should weigh in. My personal opinion is this is an emergency situation. I don't see why we need to get involved and lift our leg on something that's going to happen anyway. And string lights are string lights. And, you know, it's solution for State Street is. So I'll shut up now and hand it over to somebody else.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Lenvik.
Thank you. You know, a number of years ago, I would probably have been very opposed to the loss of vehicles on State Street. A lot of years ago, I was probably opposed to Mission Revival architecture any place in the city, but you change as you age. I think some kind of plaza down the key blocks of State Street would be really, really wonderful. The question is, can we afford it? And that, of course, is up to the politicians to make that decision, and maybe the taxpayers. One of the slides that Rob Dayton showed was the crowds and how busy State Street was, and he identified that as a weekend day. And I've been down on State Street on weekend days, Saturday, Sunday, and yes, it is very crowded, and it is quite enjoyable to be in that crowd. I went down yesterday and spent about an hour on the 900 block, 1000 block of State Street, whatever. And there were, you know, not a lot of people there during the week. And the people that were there were on the sidewalk, we'll call it, on the brick sidewalk, and they were close to the stores. A great majority of them were on the shady side, but people on the sunny side as well. So the feeling is different probably 5 days a week than it is 2 days a week. And I think we've got to work on how we take and make that 5 days a week on the great width of the street enjoyable and something that people will want to go to. And we saw that in a number of the examples that Rob showed us. I forget the towns and cities right now, but there are, you know, if it's done well, landscaped, it really works. The other thing I noticed is that people do want to sit down. They got ice cream, you know, they want to sit down, and there are very few places to sit. A number of people sat on the curb, waiting for their friends to come out of the store or whatever, or eating their ice cream. The other thing I noticed is that oftentimes you will have 3 or 4 people, young people, ladies, whatever, walking side by side down the street. And that takes a certain amount of width. I think the 8-foot standard that the city transportation department has for sidewalk, free sidewalk width is reasonable. You realize we've lost that a lot of places now because the restaurants have taken over. It works. You know, you see a break up from your 3 other people and you kind of get in a line and go through wherever you are. But, you know, some restaurants on State Street have literally taken the entire sidewalk. And to walk down the sidewalk, you are addressed by a maitre d' as you come to a restaurant. That's okay. We can work with that as well. But I think it's important that there be a good feeling of walking down the street. And aside is, yesterday, the bikers were hauling Fanny down State Street, going down. Skateboarders were also moving very, very fast. You would not feel comfortable if you were a seasoned Santa Barbara citizen walking down State Street. And if we want to get the residents of our city back to State Street, other than the young people and whatever, we need to make them feel comfortable, and controlling the bicycle movement is really, really going to be essential. It was really weird in some instances yesterday with the bikers down the center of State Street, weaving and whatever. So I think there's got to be some way to gain control of that. I think the merchants probably, if you were to ask them how important bikes are to their business, I'm guessing now they might say not at all. Not many people on bikes are looking in the windows. Not many people on bikes are stopping in to buy stockings or whatever. So I think that there is, you know, a need that we've got to address from the standpoint of making the shopping experience as enjoyable and accessible as possible. And I don't think that bikes, as they're currently being used on State Street, are advantaging that. Those are pretty much my comments. I think it's gonna work. It's gonna work. It's gonna take time. It's gonna take input from a lot of people, and I'm not sure, you know, who will end up being the design group that works on this. A question I would have for Rob Dayton: you are currently have acquired money from the city to do something with the planters, and that's great, and something needs to be done, and with some lighting. My question for you is there a designer, a landscape architect, or someone who is giving you, the city, advice on placement, so on and so forth? I think it not to take away anything from the civil engineers and the traffic engineers and whatever of the city, but there is a certain value to someone who is trained in the design aspects of life that would be, I think, valuable to have on your team as you decide colors and placement and sizes and so on and so forth of these elements, which are going to happen in
Mr. Dayton, do you want to answer that? Is there already one?
I'm done now, so I will. I'll leave it, and you can go to somebody else, or Rob can answer that. And we can
Yeah.
Before you go, Commissioner Lindvik, and I'll answer your question, but can you, so what role do you see as, I hear you saying to redesign State Street, we need to look at this. What role do you think it plays in the vitality of the downtown in the future?
Ask the question again.
What role, if we did redesign State Street, what role do you think that redesign is going to play in the revitalization or downtown vitality?
That's like asking Amy Coney Barrett what she thinks of whatever, whatever case. I can't predict. I can only hope that our State Street will be as successful as Boulder and Denver and whatever, Minneapolis. I don't know if you got Hennepin Avenue, Minneapolis. I only hope it can be as successful as those. And I think that with good and proper design, it will be attractive and people will want to come. If it's just putting more K-rails or whatever at the intersections plopped across, people aren't going to be excited about that. I'd find, if I were you, I'd find a half a dozen artists or a dozen artists in Santa Barbara and say, come up with some ideas in the next 2 weeks to replace the K-rails for some kind of control. And I bet you'll find that there is a lot of good ideas are going to come out of the art community as temporary stuff that we would want to come down and see, but I can't predict. I can only hope that it works out really well as a redesign.
All right.
Okay,
Here's the hope.
thank you. Well, Mr. Chair, let me just answer the question is yes, we have landscape architects. Don't let transportation planners and engineers plant plants. Maybe a clarification for the commission that might help is the way the State Street subcommittee has been talking is that now we're in the temporary period. We're moving into an interim period. An interim period is prior to the time it's going to take to come to this commission and actually design a street properly. That's going to take a lot of time and a lot of community input. We think probably 3 years. So the interim time we're in where, I think Commissioner House referred to it as the experimental phase, is trying to experiment in the nicest way possible. So you're right. We need to, where's the artist? Come out and do this. We need to, if the K-rail has to be there, Mr. Traffic Engineer, can we doll it up? And so, yes, it's exactly what we're talking about. So you're in the right, we're in the right line.
One thing before Mr. Uli gets in there, one thing that I would say, you're moving into the interim period. One of the things that I've seen on State Street is a lot of restaurants have spent a lot of money to make their outside enclosures really, really nice. And I really enjoy eating at some of them. Others, you walk down the street and there's a round table and 3 chairs sitting on the pavement. And there are 3 or 4 of them, and that's all there is. Well, that's not attractive at all. That's almost embarrassing to see a table sitting in the middle of State Street with 4 chairs around it. Almost embarrassing. I would say in the interim period, what you want to do, or hope you would do, or I would suggest happen, is that something other than raw wood be presented to the public. Painted wood is better than raw wood, and if you could convince all of these restaurants or whatever, now you're up, paint your handrails or whatever, do whatever. Hire artists to give you some suggestions.
Malaga Green.
Say it again.
Malaga Green.
No, I a lot of off-white or whatever is great, but also the artists can say, hey, every other post can be a different color and make a wave out of it. I don't care what it is, but something other than raw wood.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, Commissioner Uli, and I'm just trying to hurry along so we make sure we are staying at least and we don't lose our quorum. So, all right.
Yeah, well, since we're already out of time, I'll submit my written comments. No, I'd be letting everybody off too easy. First of all, these are 3 great questions, and it is extremely difficult for 5 people to express their answer to these questions in 15 minutes. But I appreciate the question being posed. So how do I feel about, is this the right time? I would say when there is enough critical mass that causes change in a city, it is always right. What that change is up to a community conversation to figure out what the bits and pieces are. And it is really, really easy for members of this commission to jump right in the weeds and tell you, I like that weed, I don't like that weed. But I think at this stage, well, we're trying to fly by at 60,000 feet and just, get the big points. So yeah, I believe it is a good time to have this conversation. I've known for quite a while. I think I've been in this town almost 45 years, so that's a little bit of time. That there have been ongoing conversations about this kind of thing on State Street from a number of vantage points, all of which are very important and cannot be minimized. I would encourage everyone to pick up Jane Jacobs' book, The Death and Life of a Great City. I think that's what it is. Let me make sure I quote it right. Death and Life of a Great
American City?
American Cities. And while she sets the story pretty much in a very large city like New York, a lot of those things that she discusses have to do with any downtown area of a community. And my personal view is, how important is State Street? Well, State Street is like the spine to the city. You pull the spine out of the organism, and the organism doesn't have any connection to itself. City Hall is supposed to be the brain, and other parts are supposed to be the extremities of the city that work in concert with one another. But if you don't have a spine and a nervous system running down the middle, then I think you're pretty much cooked. So State Street, I believe, will always be the critical notion that it is. And one thing that I missed about your slide presentation is that I don't think you had the appropriate first slide, and that is that the Native Americans were here much longer than we have been here, and their State Street ran pretty much in the same path, but it was a cow path, from the ocean to the mission, before the mission was there, obviously, but they're well-worn cow paths that become streets. So that corridor, if you will, has been important for thousands of years. If I advance myself, all things in a good world, and I advance myself 10 years and I'm on State Street, what experience is that going to be? It's difficult, to imagine, obviously we're going to get through this pandemic and somebody's going to solve the problem and we're all going to get a shot from CVS and, we're all going to be good. But I believe that the corridor, the street, in whatever shape or dimension it is, needs to have diversity. The diversity needs to accommodate people of all walks. If it only caters to, in Commissioner Lindvik's characterization, buying, something, then we've missed it. I think the street also has to encourage and be aware of the different times of the day that people use the street, and put in features that encourage people to use it in the morning, encourage people to use it at night, encourage people to use it in the middle of the day, in the middle of the afternoon, and at lunch. I remember before becoming the county architect, I worked for a number of firms. I lived up on Upper Garden Street across from Alice Keck Park. I know nobody calls it that anymore, but
I do.
I enjoyed it.
Alice Keck Park. Anyway, I used to walk, I lived across the street, and I walked down State Street every day and back up again to Delavina. Sorry, should turn that off. And made that trip every day and enjoyed it. In the early morning, it's a different vibe, and at late afternoon, it's a different vibe. So I'm just saying that the experience should be diverse enough to accommodate everybody's use. and every time of the day. And then, of course, I think I already spoke to how vital I think State Street is with respect to any other street, and not to discriminate against any other street. There are some fine streets that are just as important, but you could probably lose them, and except for the people living on those streets. So again, I don't mean any pejorative sense about.
We're gonna get angry Milpas writers. Angry Milpas writers gonna write in.
The letters are going to come in now from advocates of Quintos. I don't but I'm just saying that I believe State Street is the backbone of the community. I think a lot of people have a general sense that is the case. A lot of comments that we get at the courthouse from visitors is that they continually refer to the building as if it were a living person. They've internalized that experience in a way that is interesting. So I think a lot of people, a lot of residents, and a number of visitors who come back again and again and again, year after year, have internalized what they feel about State Street being more like a family member than it is, a transportation corridor. And speaking of transportation, I know I'm going to wrap up here, Mr. Chair, so you get a chance to chime in too. Speaking of transportation, I would encourage that we keep some level of transportation on the street, whether it's a shuttle that you can hop on, because that solves the old man trying to walk up State Street, or you've got a handful of packages you got on Upper State and you're trying to get down to the parking structure, that kind of a thing. I would encourage that, and then and allow the bicycles to use the same path. I don't think you have to duplicate these paths. I think they can share the same path. That might slow them down a little bit. Other than the old man sticking his cane out in the bicycle wheel to stop the bike, I don't know how much you can really enforce kids from being kids. It's just the fact of life. Anyway, there's my quick thoughts.
Thank you. And Commissioner Uli and any commissioner, feel free to go ahead and answer the questions in writing and send them to me, and I will just add them to your name.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Drury, did you want to add anything before I do the last bit?
I have a couple hours worth of questions and comments. Mr.
right.
Dayton, I have a question concerning the photographs of the promenades. How many of those were purpose built as promenades, and how many were changed over from thoroughfares into plazas?
Well, I haven't intentionally looked at that question, but in terms of the American streets, they were all vehicle streets in the past.
They were, okay, that's good.
And in terms of the European streets, you can imagine they were all sorts of things.
Right.
Because they were around for more than the American century. They're multi-century thoroughfares.
Okay, so I think the comments that have been made so far are right on the money. I too feel that I grew up here, and State Street was the place to go. And I think it still is. I think even more so nowadays when it's been closed off except for the cross streets. And I think that the thought cannot just be about tourist dollars. It has to be about the repeat performances of people coming downtown, because it's a really interesting and lively place to be. And I'm not even sure that shopping is as important as spending money on restaurants downtown. I think that's what brings people to stay there and enjoy an evening or a day, or in my case, I stood up Steve House for a drink, but that can always be rectified at a appropriate bar. I think that I don't like the idea of a shuttle. I don't like the idea of bicycles on a going down through a plaza. Young people be young people. I mean, just stop all that traffic entirely, in my opinion, and really make it a peaceful place where people don't have to worry about seeing somebody across the street going, "Hey, how you doing?" and stepping out and being run over by a kid on a bike, because that's kind of what's been going on. I think Commissioner House said much the same thing. I've seen it all the way up toward Solar Street. People come down off of the unblocked part of Solar from Micheltrena, and they're just hauling. So I think that really needs to be addressed, I don't know, with bollards or chains or large clubs given to all the passersby. I think that the State Street architecturally also seems to me to be it's where most of the big buildings are. So if you cross from, let's say, Santa Barbara Street and Anapamu all the way to Chapala, that's all sort of a crescendo of large buildings, starting at the courthouse, the public library, the Woolworth building, the Museum of Art, and it sort of embodies what the downtown corridor going down to the ocean is, and it's architecturally clearly the center of town. And I was dead set against any closing of State Street. I used to cruise State Street for hours in the 50s and 60s, and the idea of it being blocked off from traffic was just anathema to me. Since this pandemic, and I think it's a response not just to the pandemic, but to the e-commerce that's gone on, this really gutted mom and pop stores, I'm completely in favor of it. I think it's a wonderful thing. And I would support anything that's coherent enough to design-wise, to after the pandemic is over, and there will be CVS shots, I'm sure, at some point, to codify it as a design, a proper design element. I would be in complete favor of that, and I would support it. I think that for me, the idea of going downtown and going to a restaurant, especially, of course, the weather's been so nice, may be different when it's raining, which we hope that happens as well. I'm excited about the way State Street looks, and it's this kind of a current iteration that I hope becomes a design goal. Well, it is becoming a design goal, right, Mr. Dayton? I mean, this is something that we're pursuing. I look forward to that pursuit, and I'm in complete favor of State Street being closed off and revitalized that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. Okay, and then I'll just wrap it up. I agree with, for the most part, what everyone said, my fellow commissioners, in terms of their analysis. I do want to emphasize, well, I would say two things, and they're kind of both the same point. When the pandemic was first happening, and the first, I think it was very much the appropriate response to see, just to try to get people through this time, get businesses through this time, keep things open. And it was just sort of an immediate emergency response. And I was seeing pieces of it coming together a little behind, a little late in the game. But I was thinking right away, like, this is probably going to last longer. And if we try to figure out, if we have a proactive way of figuring out a way of gaining a look at least somewhat coherent or somewhat regular or somewhat, have some sort of a standard, not that we design everything, but just that we kind of help with some direction, even for this short-term thing, because people are spending a lot of money building these things, and they're just all building them different ways and which way. But if there were at least a couple of basic good ways that were, not expensive, that were, but at least used some sort of a regularization, then now that things are built and things keep going on, and now you're seeing that sort of the next version, which is protecting for some weather, then we'd have a more coherent ability, and that, or not ability, but city, or downtown State Street. And I think that the same thing is happening now with the midterm and then the long term even. We're having a little bit too short-sighted, in a certain sense, of approach to it. And I think it would be good for at least a couple members of HLC to be part of helping to make some of these decisions aesthetically, so that it helps kind of steer things as people are doing things that aren't permanent, even ideas of lights or even ideas of other things, that there might be 10 different or 50 different ways of doing it, but 5 of them might be better or the best for State Streets. And so helping to create selections or create guidance, I think, would be a good way that all this midterm money being spent can actually kind of take it up a little notch. And so it's not just a drastic scramble to stay alive, but actually sort of a little bit of a refined scramble as we go forward. So that I would hope. So that's one message, is I'd hope that as the subcommittees are meeting, that I think it would be great if they had some members, or a member or 2 or 3 of volunteers from HLC to help with give some additional feedback, and even though they're just interim ideas that are being done and they're more emergency. And then to fold into that the long-term issues. So we're going to be, the city's going to spend, tens of millions plus if we're talking redoing all of State Street or large chunks of State Street. And this is a massive thing. And I think it's a question that's bigger than just State Street, although obviously State Street is what we look at as the spine and as the core in that way. But I think it really brings the bigger picture, which we've been discussing over the last number of years, but which is what is the long-term plan for Santa Barbara? And I think we are, we're having the question of housing. Okay, we have this requirement by the state due to housing, and we're being sort of forced in certain ways to react and objective design standards and all this other stuff. And that's a housing question, which is a lifeblood of the city question. Well, this is now a spine question, which is a structure of the city. And then but all these parts of our city are all connected. And so I think that this also really shows that we need actually a bigger picture, holistic approach to it, because transportation is tied to not just the spine and not just the lifeblood of the housing, but to the head and to the arms and to the organs and everything. And so I think city council, it would be very sort of pound wise, even though it's penny foolish immediately, to spend money on figuring out what that long-term big picture plan is, and how the spine relates to it, and how the lifeblood relates to it, and how we look at it as a holistic way. Because otherwise we're answering one individual question one at a time, and we're in some ways separating them, and they're really not separate. If we want the best city, it's really not separate questions, and they're also it's also short-term, penny-wise, to just answer one question at a time, but long-term, over the life of the city and over the next 10 years and 100 years and however long longer it lasts, those are long-term sustainability issues and questions that I think we should all be looking at right now over this next year or two as we answer the State Street question. So I know the AIA has done some stuff and some thought on that, but I really think it needs to be a holistic and very high-level professional structuring of it. And then the State Street, a lot of these State Street questions start to get answered: transportation, how you get bikes, how you get not, or what are the different ways or maybe pieces of it. Because the other thing I think is, yes, there are some examples of very long promenades, and having lived in Rome for a couple months and knowing what it's like to do everything on foot in great cities and great downtowns and very pedestrian friendly, and appreciating that and liking that a lot. At the same time, State Street is very long, and the question of whether all of it gets closed or portions of it, or how that whole transportation and everything else work into it, I think it's a complex question, and one that needs to be really kind of worked out, as opposed to just like, well, let's just vote on closing 95% or vote on closing 5% or whatever. I think it's a complex question that interplays with all the other aspects of the city, the lifeblood, the housing, and everything else. So, sorry, that's a bit of a long-winded, but I think that's my one concern right now, is that, again, we're going to be too short-sighted and just reactionary, and we need to really put some time and money into making a real plan for the city as a whole, which will include State Street. So,
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Drury.
I want to chime in just one more time, if I may. I forgot to address the problem of the Fiesta Parade. And so my route in my imagination is from Cabrillo Boulevard up to Gutierrez, left on Gutierrez, and straight up Chapala, which is a really beautiful wide street. And that would solve the problem of the Fiesta Parade, at least for the rest of my life, anyway. Because we have to have it. I mean, it's something that brings an amazing amount of tourist dollars. The hotels, the motels, the restaurants, everything thrives during Fiesta. I think it's a really important part of our heritage. And I would like to do everything possible to ensure the fact that the parades go on. Thank you.
All right.
If
thank
you have as
Commissioner.
long a life as your mom, you'll be around a while longer.
That's right.
Well, if I live to be 107, just, make sure I'm strapped into my wheelchair before you push me off Stern Fourth.
Don't worry, I'll
Roll
be
you
electric.
roll you down State Street.
All right, and then just as a one little final note, Mr. Dayton, I did notice that the example that you showed, that you talked about the bollards and the light posts and all that beautiful shot downtown. I noticed they were all the same color and they were all the metal work. So that's just the Malaga green.
Oh, don't be mean.
It could be any color you want as long as it's Malaga green.
Got it, Mr. Chair.
All right. Okay. So anything else? You were just asking for comments, right? So there isn't any motion or anything needed to for this item.
Well, there isn't, and as Mr. Drury chimed in, other people may want to have other things to say. And if we're out of time, what I encourage you to do, what other committee and commission members have done, is just to go ahead and email me if you felt like you wanted other things you think of after the meeting that are the answer to these three questions. I will put them in under your name in the notes. We're going to compile all the notes and extract the repeated themes of the collective, and then present those major themes to the subcommittee. And then the subcommittee is going to paint a vision for the street using those themes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Plummer?
And thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to let you know we are recording the commissioner comments for this project as well. So in addition, we will have that. There's no formal motion that needs to be made since it was just a discussion item. I'll just consolidate all those.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So with that, thank you very much, Mr. Dayton, and we'll close this item.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
All right, we are on to item 328 West Montecito Street. This is a pre-application review. This is a one-time pre-application consultation for a new 9-unit hotel located on a vacant parcel in EPV. The hotel will be comprised of two-story buildings with 9 at-grade parking spaces. Planning Commission is required for development plan approval for the construction of the 7,668 square foot of new non-residential floor area and a transfer of existing development rights. The hotel is proposed as an annex to the approved hotel at 302 and 308 West Montecito Street. This is a one-time pre-application consultation. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. All right. Ms. Plummer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just as a reminder, as it said in the footer, the project is here for a one-time pre-application consultation today. That is happening prior to a formal application submittal. So it's just a cursory review of a potential project, and I'll invite the applicant to turn on their webcam and microphone so they can give their presentation. Thank you.
All right.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Shelby Messner, project planner.
And I'm Noah Greer, the architect working on the project.
Okay, welcome.
Great.
All right, and just so you know, there's a little timer here we have for 15 minutes, and please try to stay within that. We'll have questions and everything after. If you go over by a little, I'll let you go, but in fairness to the next applicants and to keep us moving, we'll try to stick to that, okay?
All right, I will kick us off here with a little bit of just a project introduction. As mentioned, we're here for one-time concept review. As this hotel is proposed to be an annex from a recently approved hotel down the street at 302 and 308 West Montecito Street. That's a much larger hotel. And this is proposed to be just sort of a smaller annex to that. You would check in at the lobby down the street and then If you're staying at this little annex, you're on the corner at Castillo and Montecito Street. And Ms. Plummer, would you mind switching to the photo sheets that I had sent yesterday? I'm just going to start off real quick with a quick context of exactly where we are. So 328 West Montecito Street. We're on the corner of Castillo and West Montecito. Great, yes, that intersection you can see right there highlighted in kind of a indigo blue. And I've just got a couple photos that we've taken from around the neighborhood. If you wouldn't mind just kind of scrolling along the sheet there, we can go through a couple of them. We don't need to spend too much time. This is a currently vacant site. There used to be a gas station at one point, but it's been demolished. So currently vacant, directly adjacent to the Santa Cruz Market on West Montecito Street. And kind of on the other corner, we've got a couple different commercial uses, and we can keep scrolling through the photos if you wouldn't mind. We have some residential kind of diagonally across on West Montecito Street. And here's a view looking from, you're standing at 7-Eleven, looking straight onto the vacant parcel. Move to the next photo, great. So kind of moving down the sheet here, this is, you're just about at the Montecito Street and Castillo corner, looking onto the site right there. And I believe our next photo is just about in the same location as well. Yeah, just kind of facing Santa Cruz Market. If you kind of head up West Montecito Street, heading towards Cliff Drive. Oh, I'm sorry, we're on Castillo here. Looking up towards Cliff Drive, you can see our parcel on the right and the little Chevron gas station on the left. Great. Yeah, so now here we're looking from the gas station towards the project site. We can probably just look through maybe one more of these photos and we can move on to the neighborhood context. So this is just a little bit further to where Montecito becomes Cliff Drive. And Ms. Plummer, if you could switch to the next sheet here with just a little bit of neighborhood context, that'd be great. Okay, and I just have a couple of photos for you for the overall neighborhood and what the rest of the surrounding area looks like. There are a number of other hotels in this area. This proposal is for a 2-story hotel. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe if you could zoom in on photo number 7, which is in the top right corner. Great. This is a recently constructed La Playa Hotel on Castillo Street, which is really just a little bit down from the corner of where we're at. And if you just could go to photos number 8 and 9, those are some other views. And I think these are important because these are, this is a 3-story hotel on the street frontage there and 2-story in, you can see in the parking lot, it'll be similar in design to what we're proposing. And if you wouldn't mind just going to the photo number 1 and then photo number 2 are kind of our first, just other 2 photos that we can focus on. Great, so again, just a little bit of an idea of where we are. This is standing on Castillo Street, looking towards, this is a liquor mart and the Chevron gas station, looking up Castillo towards the kind of other hotels that we move towards the beach. And then if you just wouldn't mind going to number 2, so the larger photo. Yeah, great. Just to give you an idea of that whole intersection. Great, yeah, this is standing from that same, that liquor store, kind of looking at the other way. So pretty busy intersection here, but there's a lot of mixed use in the neighborhood, hotels, businesses. Great, so I'm going to kind of pass it off here to Noah to go through the architecture that we're proposing with this hotel.
Thank you, Shelby. Ms. Plummer, can we start with the site plan, please? So the site, again, of course, is at the corner of Castillo and Montecito. It's quite a lively part of town. It's quite a wide right-of-way. The site itself is just under 0.3 acres, about 12,800 square feet. it really is a great a great location. It's fairly high profile. It's at the top of the hill coming under the freeway from Castillo. It's pretty heavily trafficked both with vehicles and with pedestrians. It's also really challenging for a lot of those same reasons. There's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of noise, there's a very wide right of way, and there really is no clearly dominant architectural style or even pattern of development, I'd say. So we approached it as a real opportunity to create a structure, can be pedestrian friendly development, and can really help it to feel a bit more like Santa Barbara at that street corner. So looking here at the site plan, the first floor plan, it's a little difficult to see. We'll see it more in the next plan, but there are in fact 2 buildings with 9 hotel rooms total. Square footage is just over 7,000 square feet. Building A is a building that's on the Montecito Street side with the most dominant facade that we'll look at in a moment. That comprises 4 hotel rooms. And then building B on the north side has 5 rooms. Parking is accessed off Montecito Street at a curb cut that's been pushed as far essentially away from the intersection as we could get through a gate through the facade of the building. And then it's underneath and behind buildings A and B. The intention there was to sort of avoid a parking lot at the front, to bring more of the building closer to the sidewalk there, and to hide the parking underneath, quite frankly. We did design the project with the adjacent structures in mind. So on the right, plan east, you can see Santa Cruz Market. Santa Cruz Market is a 1-story building, is very tall for a 1-story building, but it is built with a 0 lot line. So it's essentially right up against its property line. And then to the north, it's Santa Barbara Genealogical Society, which does have historic structures. We've pulled our building intentionally back a bit from that property line, and I'll talk about that a bit more. We really pushed the building to the east property line where we had Santa Cruz Market is right there. We have a 5-foot landscape buffer between our building and Santa Cruz Market. And then at the north side, that's where we have at its tightest an 8-foot setback from the property line, 9.6 to the west of that, and then 15 feet for the majority of that facade. Thank you. So we really did try to oversize the setbacks where we felt it was appropriate. We've also pushed back from the street a bit farther than we had to, from Montecito Street, I mean, to provide for some additional landscape there. You can also see in this plan that we've been intentional about providing plenty of mass at the ground floor, especially on Montecito Street, where we have a lot of openings. That wall thickness is 18 inches minimum there along Montecito Street, because there will be openings and you will be able to read the thickness of the building there. I should also say on the west side at the corner, we do have a stucco wall, sort of a decorative stucco wall proposed to help with the noise issue. It's been cited to provide for a landscape courtyard on the interior of the site and also landscaping on the exterior of the wall. All right, thank you. Can we skip to the next plan? Okay, so I think this plan gives you a good sense, readily legible sense of where the building sits in relation to the property lines. I don't think I need to walk you through the plan in too much detail, but you will see here that these are units and living rooms with living rooms, as was mentioned in one of the letters to your commission. And many of the units also have very grand bathrooms. And I should say that this is very much driven by market demands for hotel rooms. That's what we're seeing. And that's why it's been designed that way. Okay, if we could skip to the building elevations, please. I'll start with elevation 3, the south elevation. This is arguably the primary street frontage along Montecito. And so we're looking north. On the left would be Castillo as it starts to drop down past Santa Barbara Genealogical Society. The pedestrian entrance is near the center here under the tower element. And then next to that, we have the vehicular entrance gate. To the right of that, the arched openings, those are open air openings, again, hiding the parking lot behind the facade of the building. So the building itself, it has a dominant tower element here with a balcony. We certainly are going for steel troweled white stucco, mission tile roofs, and associated sort of appropriate architectural detailing. I don't think I'll be happy to answer any questions about them, but I want to keep going with the time we have. Can we look at elevation 1, the west elevation, please? So this is the Castillo elevation. This is where you can really read that it's 2 buildings on the parcel. Montecito Street would be on your right in this elevation. You can see here we've worked hard to sort of articulate the facade a bit. An example of that is a stepped guardrail at the stairs, and then other architectural elements consistent with the architecture. Thank you. Can we look at the east elevation? So in this elevation on the left with the tower element, that's Montecito Street. And so behind us here is Santa Cruz Market. So we have a 5-foot setback, but again, Santa Cruz Market is simply a very tall 1-story blank stucco wall. So what you're seeing, the openings there are open air to the parking that's been hidden underneath and behind the buildings. Then on the right-hand side, on the other side of the property line, of course, is where Santa Barbara Genealogical Society is. And we very intentionally tried to keep the mass of the building down there. While we're allowed to build a 40-foot, 5-foot high, 3-story building here, and some of the examples of nearby development we saw were in fact 3-story buildings, we've kept it very intentionally to 2 stories, and we've stepped down the mass there adjacent to the Genealogical Society. Thank you. Lastly, can we look at elevation 4, the north elevation? So this is the elevation that faces the Genealogical Society. Again, the portion on the left with the balcony, that's set 15 feet back from our property line. This elevation is perhaps a bit more modest, but the intention was to provide enough architectural interest to keep it from just being a plain Jane back of house type of elevation. Thank you. So I think I'd say to wrap up my comments on the elevations, again, this site could be developed at a much higher level of intensity than we're proposing. It could be considerably taller and considerably more massive than we're proposing. And it really was, we made quite an effort to hide the parking as much as possible. And I hope that's legible in the design. Okay, lastly, I wanted to answer a couple questions from the letters that were sent to your commission. There were questions raised about how this project relates to the main hotel at 302 West Montecito. So the intention is that this is very much an annex to the main hotel. It very much utilizes, there are shared resources between the 2 sites, with the lobby and reception and housekeeping all being located at 302 West Montecito. So the check-in process here is primarily intended, I should say envisioned, to be digital, or visitors will go first to 302 West Montecito, and then they will come here into their rooms. There is no on-site staff proposed at this site. All of that, all staff are based out of 302 West Montecito, which is a short walk. All of the parking is on site for this project. We have 9 spaces, which is consistent with what's required by the city. We're not requesting any modifications whatsoever with this design. Okay, so to conclude, we really made an effort here to design a project that I felt it was site appropriate in scale, and also could really take advantage of that wonderful corner location, wonderful and challenging corner location. And I hope that, I look forward to hearing your comments. We really want to design a project that is an asset to that corner. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, with that, let's go to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this item, please click on the raise your hand icon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I could just ask the applicants to please mute themselves and turn off their webcams right now during public comment. Thank you. Any members of the public who are joining us, if you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And that indicates to me that you wish to speak. Please note you only need to click the hand icon one time, and a raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down as shown in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I first have Karen Ramsdell. Karen, I have just unmuted you. If you could please unmute yourself. It looks like your microphone's ready. You have 2 minutes whenever you're ready to speak.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and Commissioners, my name is Karen Ramsdell. I'm a board member of the Santa Barbara County Genealogical Society and represent the board today. The society owns the property adjacent to the subject parcel at 316 and 322 Castillo. And we operate a genealogical research library, and also at the library we hold classes and other society activities. The society has 5 areas of concern, and we do understand that this is just a pre-application consultation and that some of our comments may be more appropriate for Planning Commission purview, but we still want them on the record. The society is not necessarily opposed to a hotel on this parcel, but we do have concerns because the parcel is so small that using a transfer of development rights may be, at least in our view, overbuilding the site, although the planner indicated they could build much more on the parcel. And we are also concerned about the hotel being an annex to 302 West Montecito. If 302 is sold, what happens to the operations on the subject parcel? We are also concerned that eventually the applicant could convert this to student housing for Santa Barbara City College, and we voiced that same concern for the parcel at 302. In terms of size, bulk, and scale, the 2 two-story buildings, this was mentioned, on one side it is adjacent to the society's property. And the buildings on all 4 corners are pretty much, of that intersection, are pretty much 1 story. So we're just concerned that a 2-story, at least next to the society's property and library, may kind of dominate the library. In terms of noise from the project, the buildings are reasonably close to the society's library. And we recommend maybe looking at a solid wall to separate the hotel from the library property to help maybe attenuate some of the noise impact. In terms of parking, 9 spaces don't seem adequate. I guess staff isn't intended to come to the hotel, but if the spaces are full, we would not like to see the parking go on to the society parking lot.
And I'm sorry, you're out of time now. If you could wrap it up very quickly. Any last thing?
And ingress and egress is an issue which has been mentioned before. So we thank you for hearing our comments.
Okay, thank you.
And then I have Richard Clausen. Mr. Clausen, I've just unmuted you. It looks like your microphone is ready. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give voice to what is usually just whispered, and that is that this particular developer, Mr. St. George, has a reputation for his buildings being designed with one intent in mind, but ultimately gravitating toward student housing. And I find the commodious living rooms in the planned hotel rooms to be, frankly, a little bit suspicious. I looked for the online drawings of the 302, 308 West Montecito Street to see whether those rooms were designed the same way, because this is billed as being an annex. I actually couldn't find those. What I did run across was the denial by the Planning Commission of that project. And so I'm still up in the air as to whether the 302, 308 West Montecito Street Hotel, to which this is an annex, is a viable project. And I am concerned, well, I should say that I find the style to be attractive. I like the style. I think that there's a variation in the height and the setbacks, the window details as they're shown conceptually. And I think that while the height is allowable and similar to what's nearby, I don't think it's particularly appropriate at this corner, which does loom tall as you come from the 101 part. And I am concerned about the privacy of the Genealogical Society property, which has a garden just adjacent to this proposed building. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson.
And then I don't see any other hands raised at this moment, but I'll give members of the public just one more chance and ask Heidi in the meantime, did we receive any written correspondence for this project?
Thank you, Ellen. And to the chair, we did receive written correspondence on this item. It was received after our cutoff time, but it was still distributed to the commission prior to this hearing. So yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And Mr. Chair, back to you. There are no more hands raised.
Okay, thank you. All right, to the commissioners now for questions. All questions for the commissioners. If you would, actually, if you would turn your cameras back on and maybe just raise your hand if you have any questions.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner House.
I just wanted to make sure I understand on the floor plan, it looks like that vehicle gate is a sliding gate, and it looks like it slides behind a wall, which looks like I'm also understanding that from the elevation, but under that triple window adjacent to the bike parking, there's a large projection in the elevation, which isn't on the plan. So it kind of looks like that gate would conflict. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly. So
can you go back to the elevation now too, just so we can see? Thank you, Tim. And then if you could, Mr. Greer, if you wanted to explain it.
Yes, so you are reading the plan correctly, that essentially the gate here would slide to the right. And of course it would need to be designed to clear the projection at the arched opening with the 3 openings there. But yes, as it's roughly designed now, the intention was that the gate would slide in front of those 3 arched openings as cars were passing through, and then it would slide back to close the entry.
And presumably it would be your intention to have substantial landscaping there, so you weren't really focused on that gate coming out of the wall.
Yes, and I'm happy to say we have room there for substantial landscaping.
Okay, and I think my only other question was, what are your plate heights?
The plate heights are 10 feet in all the rooms. We did have to go slightly higher. I think I went to 11, if I'm not mistaken, at the parking, so that we could clear, so vehicles could clear structural.
I see. Okay. So both the first floor and second floor units have 10-foot ceilings, basically.
Correct.
Okay. That's all my questions.
All right.
Mr.
Other
Chair.
commissioner questions? Commissioner Drew.
Mr. Chair. Yes. Oh, good Lord. It went away. I'll come back.
Sounds good. Other commissioner questions?
I just remembered.
Oh, all right. Go for it.
I'm sorry. May I butt in?
Yes, please.
Yes. So what would stop? What is it? Is there a civic mechanism that would stop a hotel from becoming apartments or condominiums or student housing? What is that? Is there a way that could be prevented?
So I can kind of address that. If these
Okay.
were going to become an apartment building, there's a different set of standards that we would need to meet. There is open space that's required for that, which this is designed as a hotel, so we do not have open space for each unit. There would need to be ground floor open space requirements met. There are air quality design standards for sensitive receptors for residential. So that's kind of the mechanism that makes it difficult to convert to a hotel. Convert to apartments. This is designed
The other way.
as a hotel. It's designed as a nice big hotel. You can bring your family, you can have space, not be, cramped with 4 people in one little room together.
All right,
And so
thank you.
as a follow-up question to that question, and maybe Ms. Plummer can help fill in if you don't know the answer or confirm the answer. So if this were to be built and as is or whatever with its standards, and if for some way that they were able to get the other standards to work as well, the mechanism to change would be to do what? To go to planning commission, to go to what would be that change process? Is I guess assuming that, so say for example, somehow this design did have open yard, met all the other requirements. How does a hotel change to a apartment complex in the city of Santa Barbara?
Mr. Chair, so first I do want to remind the commission that the purview of this board is the design, and that is why it's here today. But in regards to the actual process, if a project were to move forward and an official application were to be submitted, this particular project would be going to Planning Commission for the commercial square footage and the transfer of existing development rights that they're proposing. If they wanted to do a change at some point, it would be a change of use from a hotel to residential. And I think Shelby did a good response as far as there's different requirements for residential properties in terms of open yard space, in terms of setbacks as well. So there would be a whole other process that they would have to go through to convert to a residential property.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out on the officially explained so that we have it on that record as an understanding. And then, okay, Commissioner Lenbeck, question.
I have a question of staff, and you may not know this, but I'll ask it anyway. How did this particular little strip of land, Montecito Street and what is it, Castillo, whatever it is, how did that fall into the EPV? Staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Lenbeck, and through the chair. Unfortunately, I don't know offhand how it ended up as part of El Pueblo Viejo. As you know, the other hotel is in ABR's jurisdiction, but I can research that, and when and if this comes back, I'll have a response.
It's not that important. It's curious that this would be an EPV concern, and I don't want to belabor the point.
I think when Haley was stretching his grid, it got the cowhide stretched a little far in the wrong direction and got EPV on the ear somehow. All right, to be continued on that. Other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Drury.
This date, October 14th, is the first time I've heard Ms. Plummer ever say she didn't know. In 5 years on the commission.
Let it be known.
I don't want to start slipping now, but
asking the right questions is all.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And then Ms. Plummer, why is the sky blue? All right. We'll go on to any other questions. Okay, I did have a question regarding on elevation for the balcony. See if we can get that. Was there what was there design inspiration or the openings of the roof in that whole composition. What's the reasoning behind it, and is there a design inspiration that you're thinking about?
Thank you, Chair. I'd say there was no specific building I was looking at there. The intention, again, was to sort of keep the roof lines as low as possible. So rather than having some sort of a bump out where the opening for that balcony, I should say, recesses into the building for that room. So the idea was that we could just get, the thinking being, what if we were just to take the beams, the sort of oversized roof joists, peel the roof back, just create an open air sort of a feeling of being underneath a trellis, and then having them resting upon a sort of quite a large heavy timber beam running left to right there underneath them. I know that part of the design needs a lot of resolution and isn't completely worked out. The idea with the wood balcony, I know it's a little bit of a one-off, but it seemed like a pretty unique situation in the building that could pull off something a little unique back there. Of course, your thoughts are welcome.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if there's not any other questions, Commissioner Uli, question.
You're muted.
You're muted.
I've been even more quiet that I've been muted. So, that's it's always helpful. Interestingly enough, the reason why it is in our purview is in our land grab of the West Beach. Our district boundary goes up West Beach and then up to that intersection and back down around 101. So that intersection is covered within our purview.
We should grab East Beach too.
Well,
we have it.
All kinds of things can be done under COVID. So we got.
Oh God, Mr. Chair, I do have a question. Just for orientation, that north elevation, is that the one that parallels oh good Lord, what's that?
It's an exhibit.
Does that parallel the genealogical society? The north elevation?
I believe so. That's the question though.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
it does. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So carrying on, I just wanted to answer your question about that, but carrying on with my comments, in general, I think it's a good first step, a good first run at the overall design. It will be interesting to see how it gets developed in detail as it comes forward. I do think on the elevation that faces Castillo Street, and this might go as a general comment overall, number one, that some of these details give me a contemporary feel, not a strong traditional feel. I think the swipes and the depths and the dimensions, particularly of that stepped element going up the stairs, feels more contemporary to me. So I would just caution that you don't get too whimsical about it. As you've stated and as we've noted, this is a primary intersection. A lot of people are used to that empty lot being there, not cluttered with something. So you've only got one chance to get it right, I believe. Unless somebody buys the project and tears it down, then they've got something to do. I think it's important to be sensitive to the genealogical society next door. If they've got a meditation garden or a research garden or a library, not that we can guarantee anything, but to the degree that there are no mechanical equipment on that side of the building, no exhaust fans, blowing, 400 CFM out the building or whatever it is, heading toward that property, I think that would be a neighborly thing to do. But overall, I like the project. It's just going to be interesting to see the details that goes forward. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner House or Vice Chair House.
As I recall on the site plan, there is a site wall along Castillo and Montecito Street, which is not depicted in the elevations. So actually, I guess I'm seeing you would see that staircase from Castillo. I wasn't sure if that was concealed behind the site wall. How tall is that site wall?
Thank you. That wall, though I haven't detailed it yet, I imagine to be effective would have to be 6 feet tall.
I see, that's what I assumed. Okay, that's my only question.
Okay, well, let's roll into comments because Commissioner Uli already started us down that road. Commissioner Lenvik.
Yeah, I have some comments to make. Number one, I think this is the appropriate scale for this corner. I think the building will work. To start off with, though, I don't know how the staff could have accepted this application because the adjoining properties aren't shown in the plan. And that is one of the requirements of a submittal, is you show the adjoining property buildings, improvements, driveways, whatever, in your plan, in your site plan. And without seeing them, I don't know what the relationship is to the Genealogical Society. So I think when you come back next time, and when you bring any other project before this commission, that you show the adjoining properties in their totality. I don't know that the Santa Cruz Market goes all the way back your entire length, the building. There may be parking back there. I just think we deserve to see what's happening in the adjoining property, number one. Number two, I think that the when you look at elevation of Montecito Street, that'd be elevation number 3. I would expect. Well, this is heavily pedestrian street, and this corner is heavily pedestrian. It's unfortunate that we don't have a street-friendly elevation here. And I don't know what the solution to that is, because you have a residence. I mean, you call it a motel, but you have a residence. And I think that in particular, that left side, or we call it the west end of that south elevation, I think has got to be treated more as a residential structure that you might find on the street. It's going to take more than a couple of windows on the ground floor to make this friendly. And if you look up and down the adjoining streets to the east, let's say, and look at the residences, you're going to find that the residential architecture is much more interesting from the street perspective. And I think you're going to have to work on solving that in some way, shape, or form. Also, we have pushed hard as a design review board to not have garage openings right flush with the building elevation. As a matter of fact, our objective design standards require the garage opening to be, what, Anthony, 5 feet, 10 feet back from the primary elevation? There's some dimension back, and I think you're going to have to work on your plan to push that garage elevation with the large opening back from the primary elevation. Don't know how you're going to do it, but you will. I also, as a comment, all of your elevations look cartoony as opposed to real architecture. And I think when you come back, don't bring back the same solution to your detailing and whatever, because it's cartoony, and the buildings aren't cartoons. And I think when you look at your elevation where the stairs are, the Castillo Street elevation, you're going to find that, yeah, gosh, those stairs are cartoony. Go to that elevation. Yeah, that one. Everything there is cartoony. The ridge is cartoony. Everything is cartoony. The window on the second floor above the door on the right side there, the head height is probably right at the plate line, 8 foot or 9 foot. I'm not sure the scale that we're seeing is accurate. It's cartoony. I mean, the little element that's on the corner there, the tower element, is cartoony. And so I think you've got to get serious about your detailing and how you draw your details when you bring it back to us. I don't believe there should be a large overhang on the tower. I think the tower's got no windows, it needs no overhang, it needs no protection. You know, you don't need that. So I think that, you know, that could be something you can solve. When you go to elevation 1 again, right there, that projection on the left there, I don't know why it's there with a little dinky window in it. I don't know what the benefit architecturally is. Architecturally, that would be a much more pleasant elevation without that projection. So I think there's a number of things here that need to be really looked at and studied hard. For instance, go to the floor plan, the ground plan. When you're showing the entry to the building, the pedestrian entry to the building, that gate, which is right adjacent to the garage opening. But that obviously is not an accessible entry from a standpoint of width and, you know, side dimension at the gate or so on and so forth. So I mean, you're going to resolve these things, I understand, but it's unresolved now. You have very generous plans for the units, but some of the stuff is just not clear yet. Obviously, you don't have an elevator, so I'm not sure why you have a tower other than a piece of architecture. So I have no problem with the scale of the building. I think there needs to be a lot of work to make the architecture okay. That'll be my comments.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Gray.
Mr. Chair, actually, I just wanted to clarify, and thank you for all those comments, Commissioner Lendick. I think those were great. I did want to clarify that this is here for a one-time pre-application consultation, not a full concept review. So we do not review it for consistency with all of our project plan requirements. We do this as a service to applicants so that they can bring a page, maybe 2 pages of very, very cursory level drawings to get an idea on the design before they actually proceed with doing plans for a formal application. So I just wanted to clarify it's not a full concept review that we're reviewing at this time.
Thank you.
I don't buy it.
Well, okay, you don't have to buy it. They bought it.
Oh,
all right. Commissioner Drury.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Plummer, as well. I agree with Commissioner Lenvick, which is rare. I mean, it's one of those days, you know, October 14th. I think that if we could look at elevation number 1, please. I think that, wherever it is, coming up, maybe. That's the most problematic for me because I didn't realize that cartoony was a technical architectural term. But,
if it gets used more than
I guess
7
it is.
times,
So if we're
becomes
just giving sort of an idea of what we like and don't like, I like the idea of the 2 buildings on that lot. They seem very appropriate. It's going to make that neighborhood a good deal more attractive. And I don't think that so that's the plus. I don't think you need that little excrescence on the corner on the extreme right in front of the tower in the drawing. And I think the overhang is too wide. I think that otherwise that building that elevation works. I think that the funny reverse scallops of the steps going up on this building on the left are way overkill. And I don't think you need that architectural foo-for-ah below that single window on the left on the 2nd floor. But I think the interior spaces are going to be just fine. And it does seem like the plate height is rather generous. I think that the plans need to address the fact that you've got a freeway 100 yards away and a railroad track 50 yards away. And I hope that there's some opportunity to soundproof as best as possible. It may well be that the Genealogical Society will benefit from actually the sound dampening abilities of those buildings on Montecito Street on the traffic there. But I think that generally the elevation going on, I'm sorry, it's the north elevation. I think that I would lose that Mirador on that. Yes, that one.
Well,
yes.
it's only half a Mirador. It's a Mira.
It's a Mira. Jeez. It's a Mira. I'm not sure. I think that's the elevation that would affect the Genealogical Society the most. And I think that, I would eliminate some of these kind of a bit overwrought balconies and so on. I think that the space seems to be really nice to me where the openings are. I just think that the Mirador and that wrought iron, I think that's what that is, sort of a basket in front of that double window. I think that that's overkill. But generally, I would support the project there, and we'll see the drawings further on, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gray. Commissioner House, or Vice Chair House.
Well, some days I agree with everything Commissioner Lenvick and Commissioner Drury say, but this isn't one of them.
Dang it.
Yeah, I was looking at this and thinking it was very evocative of simple 20s and 30s apartment buildings. And I thought it was a very nice addition to the neighborhood. I recently viewed and weighed in on a proposed new building on Milpa Street, actually a remodel of an existing building, making the statement that, Milpas is a gateway into Santa Barbara, and that this building is proposed, said nothing about Santa Barbara. So I'm very pleased that this is very Santa Barbara. We could have been seeing something else, not that we would have approved it, but something that, was not appropriate for Santa Barbara. I find this quite elegant. The massing is nice. There's elements of whimsy to it. I was fully aware it is a pre-application review, and so that is an opportunity for the applicant to present something sketchy that is not all thoroughly worked out, and the lines aren't hard and straight, making it look like it's been well figured out. Obviously, there are issues if we go to the west elevation on Castillo Street. On the plan, I see how the site wall joins that stair at the base, but the site wall is 6 feet high. So how does that intersect with the bottom of that stair? I'm sure that the applicant knows a lot of this already and is already thinking about how to resolve and clean up details. The little pop out on the left end of this elevation, is given more impact by the heavy lines, and I don't think it'll be that strong an element, and it just provides some shadow detail. The excrescence on the right, once again, it reminds me of little Spanish colonial apartment buildings in Hollywood, from the 20s and 30s. So I think it's very elegant. And as far as the parking, it's a strange lot, so I don't see how you're going to achieve moving the gate back further. And it's not a solid wall. I think it's appropriately handled. Those are my comments.
All right. Okay. Any other comments, Commissioner Wu? Did you give? Oh, you started us off in a comment round. So I'll throw my comments in, and then I'll try to make sense of it. Of it all, at least as a comment. So I agree with some commissioners, and I disagree with other commissioners, and I agree with some commissioners. So I think all in all, the math, I agree. I think in general, we all agree the massing seems to be appropriate for the most part. That's most of the comments have been that this 2-story broken up massing seems fairly appropriate for the site. It definitely could be by zoning a lot bigger. And I think a 2-story broken down into a 1-story is about as sort of about as small as you would get, and have it be a comfortable village feel. So I think I agree with the massing in general is acceptable. The comments that Mr. Commissioner Lenvik brought up, although this might not be necessary at this stage for as a requirement for that they actually submit that having the neighbors show up on their plan, I think that is one of the most it's the most obvious hole right now, and that we don't know. So even if we love this, and then we find out that next time that their neighbor's 5 feet away, and it's impinging on it, and it's a historic resource or whatever, I think that's going to be part of the most obvious next steps of needing to see more. So that's a definite concern or flag, but even if it wasn't necessary for this actual pre-application. The comments about the cartooniness, Commissioner Lenvik, at some sense at this level, at this basic level, at drawing at 1/8 inch with a somewhat not so thin marker, a little curve goes a long way and makes it read very cartoony as well. And I agree with some of those comments. I do think that as it develops to the next level of seriousness, I think that's fairly easy to bring it into a more serious and examined Spanish colonial revival. I think at this level it is the scale of a cartoon, so it's fairly easy for it to read that way. And some of the swoops and some of the turns, I think, are moves that make it even read a little bit like that. But I think that that's easy enough to adjust to the next level. I'm not offended by the tower so much, or by a little pop out, although I think those can all get reworked a little bit and get worked on and studied. I think that if you're going to take this to the next level, I think right away would be looking at a whole bunch of examples of all these little elements that you're trying to bring in and bring together, and look at good historic examples and how they've worked out successfully throughout the city, and even Southern California in a broader context. You can find some good Spanish colonial revival examples that do work in Santa Barbara as well. So I think that a lot of those details can get finessed, but you do need to get serious about what you're referencing and how you're referencing it pretty early if you want to make it a successful off the bat. One of the other notes I saw was, in general, your walls, I know at this level it's a very cartoony, but actually if you can go to at the super conceptual level, but if you go to the floor plan for a minute, and I just want to make sure that you take into consideration just for thicknesses, all exterior walls should really read as, any wall that has a puncture in it should really read as a deep wall. And so right now they're looking all thin, and of course this is just very conceptual, but make sure to start thickening those walls on the exterior anytime we're going to see the openings or see a puncture in them. Aside from that, so let me summarize and at least try to get comments where I'll say if this is one where we're not all in agreement on everything. So I'll just summarize with some commissioners where there wasn't a fairly universal agreement, and then the applicant can take our comments and go from there, see which way they want to go, and what they might be able to, how they might be able to design things so that they get more commissioners on board. Okay, so what there at least most or some commissioners will just say thought that the design was looking too whimsical and needed to be more serious. Overall, and actually let's start with this. In general, overall the massing seemed to be acceptable. The massing and the breaking up of the massing, the general mass, bulk, and scale seemed to be an acceptable treatment for this lot, with the note that we still need to see the neighboring properties the neighboring buildings and the neighboring properties to make sure that that works. But currently, as the massing appears acceptable. And the scale seems appropriate and acceptable.
The elevation on Montecito Street, let's go there first. So yeah, the elevation on Montecito Street. There was concern, and I do share this if at all possible. I do think that the entry to the drive being back a little further would be ideal. So we'll say at least some commissioners felt that the opening to the driveway should be pushed back more, and that the tower. Some commissioners felt the tower overhang was not with rafter tails was not appropriate. And some commissioners loved it.
Yeah.
What's that?
Overhang is excessive?
Yeah, like excessive or yeah. I think that was what you were saying, Commissioner Lendick, right? Yeah. Let's see, and clearance for how the garage gate opens also needs to be figured out on this elevation as well. It needs to be resolved. Let's see, on the west, let's go elevation by elevation. We talked about the depth of walls. So the wall depth on all exterior walls needs to be increased to show deeper recess in the windows and doors. Some commissioners felt that on the west elevation, the small second story pop out was unnecessary, or I don't want to use the word cartoon. What's that?
Excessive.
Excessive. There we go. That's good. And that the staircase leading up to the second floor was needed to be more serious and resolved. In addition, there was concern about what the wall along that west elevation looks like and the effect it has in the street, the noise reduction wall. Let's go to the next elevation. For the east elevation, I don't think we had a lot of comments on that. Let's go to the last elevation. Yeah, there we go. The north elevation. In the north elevation, the Mirador balcony element is unresolved, and yeah, is not resolved well and needs to be redesigned. That opening and balcony. We'll just leave it at that. There's probably a number of ways they could do it. And then and there was also, I agree with this concern as well, the wrought iron balcony needs to be, as shown, second story wrought iron balcony on this needs to have a more serious design and be more traditional, more EPV. And let's see, I think that's for the most part it. Did I miss? And I guess as a general comment, the details need to be, the details throughout, you can make sure that you come with precedent, at least studies or thoughts or ideas that show where you want the design direction to go for the different elements. And actually one more I just realized I hadn't mentioned was the spacing between the windows was too thin. It needs to be thicker between the two separate windows in this elevation. They're separated with like 6 inches of plaster, so it needs to be greater distance of plaster.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner House.
Perhaps we could add to the motion that it would be desirable if and when they return with this as an application that their presentation include 3D models to give context of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate as well. Makes sense. it'll give a sense of scale on the block on how it feels at the intersection from different directions. Okay, so any other comments to add?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Drury.
Yeah, just also to reiterate, the massing is appropriate, and
Yeah.
you know, actually a very delicate and appropriate massing for that small parcel, and I think it's a vast improvement over what was there even during the heyday of the gas station. And it's gonna, as Commissioner House said, I didn't really think of this as a gateway, but it really is Montecito Street and coming off the freeway for southbound tourists. It's going to be a very nice addition to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
The devil is in the details, however. Thank you.
Yep. Sounds good. All right. And I think that is covered in that first comment, that the mass bulk and sales scale seems appropriate for the neighborhood, with the condition that we need also see how it interacts with the surrounding property. Okay, so with those comments, does someone want to make a motion?
So, Mr. Chair, because this is a one-time pre-application consultation, you just provide comments to the applicant.
Okay.
There's no motion
Sounds
for
good.
continuance.
Gotcha. And we also require that you don't change it into apartments and you double the parking. Just kidding. Strike that from the record.
Really
Can't do
say
that. Okay. Out of our purview. All right. All right. So I guess those are the comments. Okay.
And I guess we're adjourned.
So we still have one more, don't we?
Please don't adjourn.
Oh, I have to go.
Do you have to? Are you serious?
No.
No, gosh. Okay. You're not allowed to do that.
I forgot.
Okay. So we are running a little behind. Let's continue on. We are on to item 4. Do we need to take a break, 5-minute break, or are we good?
I'm fine.
Okay. All right, speak now. All right. On to item 4, 920
More
Summit
than a little
Road.
behind.
What's that?
You're more than a little behind. Yeah.
Hey,
Behind.
we're still in the 4s. We're still in the 4s.
Yeah.
Less than an hour.
Activator, the speakers.
All right. Item 4, 920 Summit Road. This is, I think this is our last time, I believe. New item. This is for concept review. This is the Montecito Country Club, constructed in 1916 to 1918 by Bertram Goodhue and altered in 1921 by George Washington Smith. It's designated a structure of merit in 2019. Proposal for a new 1,110 square foot golf simulator facility that will be located adjacent to the existing tennis court, tennis building, cart storage building, and clubhouse. The new building consists of 2 golf simulation hitting bays and includes all related mechanical, electrical, and associated site work to accommodate the new facility. Development plan approval is required for the construction of a new non-residential floor area. The project must be found by the community development director to be in substantial conformance with the original project approval. And next slide. This is for concept review. No final appealable decision will be made at this hearing. That's part A, and part B is requesting acceptance of the historic structures and sites letter prepared by Post Hazelpine Associates. The report concluded that the proposed project meets the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. Therefore, implementation of the proposed project would have a less than significant impact on designated significant historic resources at 920 Summit Road. After implementation of the proposed project, the clubhouse building would maintain its status as a City of Santa Barbara structure of merit. All right, so welcome. So for this, because we have the 2 parts, well, what we'll do is we'll do part A first with the project presentation, and then we'll put that on hold and we'll go to part B and have the historic structures report presentation and discussion and acceptance if it's appropriate, or if it's deemed so, and then I'll come back to part A. So just as an order of reference. And then as well, there's a timer up here. So for 15 minutes, please do your presentation. That's just for the part A, and then we'll have part B as a separate thing. And then we'll have public comment after each section. So, all right. So with that, welcome. Please introduce yourselves for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't think we'll be that 15 minutes, but we'll see what we can do. Happy to bring you home today. My name is Steve Welton. I am the agent for the
Sorry, Mr. Welton, it sounds like we're getting some feedback. So I think if you have two devices going, you're going to have to mute one of them. So it only picks up audio from one. And it also looks like it might not be yours. Okay, if I could just ask everybody who's not speaking to mute themselves, and that way we can try to preserve the audio quality. All right, try speaking again, Steve, if you don't mind.
Sure. Steve Welton from Suzanne Elledge's office. We are the agent for the owners. With me today is Henry Lenny, the project designer, Sam Mathis, landscape architect, Pam Post and Tim Hazeltine from Post Hazeltine Associates, and Bill Medell representing the project owner. Many of you have seen us over the past few years as we've taken this project, as it noted in the 2005 application, then the 2008 approval, and then finally got the project design approved and implemented it and received occupancy this spring. The club opened, and then sadly with the pandemic, it's been closed again. But in the meantime, we have a project, therefore, that we thought the owner wanted to bring forward for amenity for the owners, which is a golf simulator building. It's located between the tennis court and the historic clubhouse building. And when we first came to you in 2008-9, there was an area around the clubhouse that was determined to be within your purview, and the other parts of the club were part of the ABR. So we're here before you for this review. I think I'm going to hand it off to Henry to go ahead and give you the details of the presentation.
All right. I'm Henry Lenny Design Studios, and it's nice to see you all. This is a small building. It is what is called a golf simulator. The building itself is about 1,100 square feet or less than that. And let me just walk through the, oh, can we change the page? Next page, please. This is a rendering. It's a very simple building. And we try to put an aspect of for the entrance as it is similar to what it is in the main building itself. Next page. Next page. Here you see, if I can, oh, here we are, tennis courts. This is the main building. And if you can see it here, this is where the proposed building is to be, right next to the tennis courts.
Timmy, can you zoom in a bit more to the, yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Okay, here, this is the one. This is the new golf simulator building right by the tennis courts itself. And underneath that, you see the existing cart storage building, which was approved not too long ago also. And next to that, there's the existing tennis building. So anyway, this is a small building. Next page. And this is the roof plan of the building itself. We're going to accent the entrance, and the rest of the building would become very, very simple. And again, the use for this is a golf simulator. Next page. And what a golf simulator is where, I never used one before, but you stand and you hit the ball against the screen, and it gives you all kinds of data. And it's also used for teaching purposes as well. And there is a lounge in the center. And so we have two simulators for this building. Next page. And these are the elevations. Now, I just want to note that all the detailing that we're going to be using here is detailing that was approved previously in various other buildings around the property. The roof details, windows and windows, roof, eaves, lights, downspouts. We're going to use those as they have been approved, and so everything is to match existing, including the plaster finish, etc., etc. Next page. All right, these are the engineering buildings, which I don't think, unless anyone is interested, we can skip through this and just go on to the landscape drawings. Okay, here we are. Sam, if you want to explain, you probably can explain it better than I can.
Yeah, thank you, Henry. So Sam Maphis, Third Form Design. Is there a way to blow up that a little bit larger so we can look at just the frontage of the building and the trees that exist? It sits in a current pathway that leads down to the pro shop and down to the golf course entrance and the cart barn. There's existing olive trees on both sides of the path now that will remain. 2 olive trees will be removed that sit in this general area to make room for the building that sits up against the tennis court fence and up against the wall kind of on the east side of the court areas. There's existing Canariensis palms on the right side of the entry to the tennis court. There's an existing heritage Melaleuca that sits at the far northwest side of the main clubhouse building that remains. So the setting is quite nicely treed, existing already. What we're doing is presenting the bougainvillea ground cover, the agave attenuata as accent planting on either side of the entrance. On the other side of the walkway, there's also repeated elements that are there now that we're going to be using in front of the golf simulation building. So we're really just trying to make it tie into the existing entrance and broaden the landscape feeling across the front of the simulation building so that it looks like it's been a part of the established elevation on this side of the tennis court. So bougainvilleas, agaves, there's some vines already that are on the tennis court building that will be repeated. They're on the wall of the entrance to the complex and the sitting area in front of the tennis courts. So it's really going to feel like it's been in this place for quite a while as an integration of the architecture and the landscaping in the main court entry area of the club. So I feel that the existing conditions kind of readily accept this inserted building, if you will. It's quite small, as Henry had alluded to, and the detailing should just tie it in as it will look like it's been there for quite a while. I think that kind of concludes what I need to give you in this early presentation. If there's any questions, we can elaborate in any way we need to.
Great, thank you. All right, so does that conclude all your presentation?
It does, thank you.
All right. Okay, so with that, let's go to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this, please raise your hand, following the instructions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And that indicates to me that you wish to speak. You only need to click the hand icon one time. And a raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down. And I do not see any hands raised at the moment. Heidi, did we receive any written correspondence, please?
We did not receive any written correspondence for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, still no hands, so please back to you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so to the commission for questions. Any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner, Vice Chair Howe.
Timmy, could we return to the floor plan? Okay, yeah, I was noticing some discrepancies between the windows on the front elevation between the plan view of the landscape plan and what I recalled from the elevations. In that lounge, I think you call, it's labeled as a lounge. On the left there under the window, what is that element? Is that seating or is that a counter or? You're muted, I think, Henry.
Well, first of all, there's some sliding doors that actually close in front of the simulators. In the lounge area, that is probably a counter that is going to be used for refreshments with a small refrigerator underneath. As far as the windows are concerned, on the front elevation, we, under the next reiteration, we are going to recess them 12 inches so that the windows themselves are back as far in as possible, because we also are proposing to put a sloping sill.
Right.
Now, those windows will probably be blacked out with some blackout drapes during the simulation, when the simulation is in use, because the only thing that you're going to see is the screen, and it requires total darkness for these rooms. And as far as the lounge is concerned, that is a vaulted ceiling, so you'll be able to see to the underside of the roof in this case. And then there is a tall window on the left side that faces the tennis courts, and that's just for the purpose of bringing some lights in.
Okay, now that answers my question.
All right. Other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Howe? Or sorry, Commissioner Drury.
Or Mr. Drury, yeah. Mr. Lenny, is this sort of a small version of a long building that's below and to the west? I can't remember what it was called, but it's part of the Montecito Country Club thing that we went through. It has a big central door and illumination on either side of the door.
Well, yeah, this is not part of any building, but it is.
No, I know, but no, I know that. No, I'm saying, is it a smaller version of that building?
Yes, absolutely, and that's the CART building.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, yes, that's the one. Thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Other questions from other commissioners? Okay. I had one question. So what is the inspiration? If we can go to the rendering from the front, top rendering. So,
well, what we
yeah.
want to do is to have some compatibility or slight tie-in to the rest of the building, rather than having this building be entirely on its own. And so what we did is that we basically reduced, not copied, but we reduced the size of the entrance, which is similar, but not the same as the main building, entering from the parking lot. So that was the inspiration. So we wanted to have a sense of presence for this building, as we have with all the other buildings in slightly different ways. But that was the whole idea for this. When you look at the grill and the light fixtures and the configuration of the doors and the windows, they are practically identical to what exists there now.
Gotcha. And do you have a picture of that?
Do we have? Well, let me see. We'll find them in a minute here. I don't think we have any of the actual main building itself.
Okay. That's fine. Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right. So with that, we will go into, we'll put this on hold and then we'll go to the historians and review their report. And then that looks like a math to me Hazeltine.
Doesn't want to infect his computer. You know, that can't happen.
Sorry. I'll take my mask off, which is kind of scary for all of us.
Okay, so so we'll put part A on hold and we'll go to part B, which is the historian's report. So welcome, Mr. Hazeltine, and would you like to give us a summary of your report? And
sure. Pam and I produced this report, and I think the reason we found it appropriate is that the design vocabulary for this modest building follows the design motifs, scale, and massing of other secondary structures which have been built at the Montecito Country Club since in circa 2008. So they share a similar design vocabulary, which is a very reductive and emphasizes modest scale and massing, gable roofs, stucco work, sheathing, and very simple architectural embellishments, so that the clubhouse itself, which is the historic building, still reads as the important and prominent structure rather than these later buildings. The location of the proposed golf simulator building will not impair historic views towards the Montecito Country Club building, either for the north elevation, which is the sidewalk, pardon, the parking lot side of the building, or the south elevation, which faces down towards the city. The scale and massing of the building are definitely subordinate to the historic clubhouse, which is located slightly to the southeast. The construction of the building at this location will not impair or remove historical landscaping or hardscape features. So there are no historic resources right there where the building is proposed. And finally, as I noted earlier, the reductive design is appropriate and follows that of previously approved secondary structures at the Montecito Country Club. So in our opinion, the building, which is very small and set fair distance from the clubhouse, does not present any sort of design features, scale, massing, or siding that would impair the historic resource. So our report concludes that the location of the building and its general design is consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. And it's a rehabilitation because even though it's not a historic building, obviously, because it's not, there's no building there now, it's in proximity to a significant historic resource. So that closes my presentation.
All right, thank you. All right, so with that, we will now open public comment for the Historic Structures Report. Any member of the public wishing to comment on the Historic Structures Report, please raise your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you wish to speak on this particular item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. And that indicates to me that you wish to speak. I do not see any raised hands at the moment. May I ask Heidi if we received any written correspondence?
Thank you, Ellen. No, we did not receive any written correspondence on this item.
Okay, and Mr. Chair, still no hands, so I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, back to the commission for questions about the Historic Structures Report. Commissioner Uli? Okay, I read lips, so I'm assuming you're saying you don't have any more questions, but you're muted, so.
Oh, well, that is my case today. No, I'm just following protocol by getting my face on the screen when we get to this.
All right, that's very good. Only your fellow commissioners were such good protocol followers. There we go. All right. We're still waiting for Commissioner Drury to follow protocol.
Oh, God. Bad
All right.
chance of that.
Yep. Okay, so
I have no questions.
About the report?
No.
All right. Okay, so with that, is there? Ooh,
So part of my interruption, we're getting some feedback. So I'm going to ask everybody who's not speaking, with exception for the chair, to mute themselves. And thank you. And back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so why don't we, if there's no questions, well, let's go into comments and a potential motion for on the report. Let's stay with the report. Okay. So, comments about the report?
No comments, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Uli?
I think it adequately documents the conditions of the project and is acceptable.
Mr. Chair, I agree.
Commissioner, all right.
And
All
I'll
right,
second.
someone want to make a motion?
I concur.
Someone want to make a motion?
Well, I think the issue is a motion on the whole project, not A and B. Or do you want to
Well,
split up A and B?
Ms. Plummer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Commissioner Woolley, you can do a motion to accept the report and then a separate one for the project, since they're different and you're continuing the project, right?
Well, that's an easy.
Is your concern, Commissioner Uli, if we accept the report and then we ask them to change something in the project, that then we'll have to ask them to change the report? Okay.
No, because if we do, they will, and that's the way it is.
You can also do one if it's at your discretion. I mean, if you want to do that, you're accepting the report as submitted and then include additional comments on the project, that's fine too. And yeah.
It's an easy motion to make because we don't have to do any compatibility findings or any of that neighborhood stuff. So I'd make a motion that we accept the architectural historian's report on this project.
Second. All right, I heard Commissioner House first on the second. So motion by Uli, second by House. Under discussion, any discussion? Any discussion? All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Heidi Riddell. I'll begin the roll call vote. Start with Vice Chair House.
Yes.
Commissioner Uli.
Aye.
Commissioner Drury.
Aye.
Commissioner Lenvik.
Aye.
Chair Grumbine.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so back to part A. Back to the project. So under discussion, is there anyone who wants to start the discussion on it?
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Commissioner Drury, or comments, I should say, Commissioner Drury.
Yes, this is a very, very modest proposal. And I think it's in keeping with what we've approved over the last few years that this project has been in front of us periodically. I'm in support of the project as presented. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
All right. Commissioner House?
In this case, I agree with Commissioner Drury. Could we?
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
West elevation. Personally, I just kind of feel like that window is floating. I mean, it's a tough composition because it's symmetrical and there's just that one window. And I'm thinking that would be improved by getting anchored to the ground more by being a taller window. I think that would be more dramatic. And from inside the lounge, there could just be bench seating under the window and the counter on either side of it. So I don't know, that's my only thing that catches my eye and feels maybe could be a little bit better.
Gotcha. Commissioner Lenvik?
Yes, I'm at the same elevation. I agree with what Commissioner Howes has said. I also wonder why we need to have the gable end on that center portion of that roof. It doesn't define anything. And I don't know
All
that
right.
it's necessary.
So let's turn that into a question because I think I know the answer, but let's let the applicant answer it. Mr. Lenny, would you like to, as a question, why do we need this gable end?
You have to remember that inside that lobby, we have a beam ceiling that goes to the top. And so if we change the rear and keep the front the way it is, say introducing a hip, then the effect from the interior is just not going to work. Now, keep in mind this window, and we can look at the increasing the height of it, but this window is right against the fence of the tennis courts. So there's really nothing to see there. And only the people that are going to be playing tennis could probably get a glance of this building itself. But we'll explore that possibility. Does that answer your question, Ed?
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Lendick, is that?
Yeah, no, it's not a sufficient answer. If you're going to have the gable end here, then maybe you should project that portion of the wall of that elevation under that gable out.
That was going to be my comment.
2 foot or whatever. So there's some justification for the, you're breaking that in that eave line with the gable end, and it's, it would make sense. Otherwise, I don't, you got a problem with the interior. And if you want to solve the problem with the interior, then solve the problem on the exterior as well.
All right. So that's your comment question. Okay. Other comments? I'll throw I had a similar comment, and I understand that it's on the tennis side and there's a fence and you only see it partially, but it is a big blank wall. And I think it'll actually help the whole elevation to pop it forward a little bit. And if one day they decided to change and put the tennis court somewhere else or do something else, it won't be a giant dark wall. So I think it would help to push it forward a little bit. But I actually want to go to the front elevation. So there's two things for this. One was the big blank walls on the side, which I think are being taken care of in the landscape. And it's, that George Washington Smith thing of having a big blank wall and having it be a canvas for landscape. So I think that's taken care of. But the entry, I have looked at the pictures for the main entry, and I saw that you were playing off of it before then, but I wasn't sure if you had one to talk it through. But I think on the main entrance, the way in which those your piers or pilasters go up and then chamfer in, and they angle in above the Capitol, that is being done on a flat roof section that was the addition out in front of the original club. And I think it works as a flat roof parapet to do that move where you chamfer in above the Capitol, or you angle in above the Capitol. So it seems like that front entry is not quite. It should either go flat roof and do the pier, battering in, or do something as a gable. So I don't, even if it's just going straight up, I think that it's kind of conflated the two pieces of the front entry that's currently there, which is the extension out of the flat parapet and the what's it called? Gable behind it that's further back. It's kind of conflated the two. So I think that still needs to be resolved a little bit, where above the pilasters there. And it can be done, I'm sure, a number of different ways. And then I would add to that the comment of which you've already brought up, which is the depth of the wall needs to be adjusted in plan as well to give the thickness per what your elevations are showing. Your elevations are showing a great thick wall. So those are my comments. Any other additional comments to that?
Yes. Mr. Chair.
We'll go Commissioner Drury, and then we'll go to that.
So are you, Mr. Chair, are you suggesting in your comments that the tile on the front elevation, on the doors, above the doors, I should say, should extend a little bit further beyond the pilasters? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm just suggesting for the front elevation, the proposed east elevation, that they've conflated two forms. One is a parapet wall that has those piers that chamfer in above the Capitol, and the other is a gable. And I'm saying just pick one or something else. Pick one or the other. Either your roof stays gable and you get rid of that chamfer in, and maybe you just go straight up, or maybe you eliminate it altogether and make it even, like you were talking about. I'm sure there's a bunch of different ways of doing it, but it seems like that portion isn't quite resolved quite as nicely as the main entrance does.
I understand. Thank you.
So I I wanted to leave it up to them to how do they want to resolve it, but it just seemed a little bit unresolved.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner House and then Commissioner Lundvik.
I'm noting on the elevation that the plane of the plaster steps back to the foundation under the weep screed. So your detailing should show how you're going to carry that plane of plaster down to the ground.
Yeah, that's a good point too. All right, Commissioner Lundvik.
Yeah, I have a question. It seems like on the north and the south ends of the building that the gable overhang is quite large. And what's it protecting? Am I missing something?
I think that's a graphic thing. I don't think it is. I thought the same thing too. On the north and south end, I don't think there's any projection. I think it's basically flush. It's just the gutter.
I see. It's a downspout. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Downspout, yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And on the other side, it's a continuation of a wall. I thought the same thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay. All right. So let me attempt to summarize. So in all, the commission. So this is for. This is coming to us for comments, right? For a motion with comments. This is not design. This is just concept. That's right. Okay. So the comments are. In general, the design, the massing of the design is appropriate and works well with the historic resource. And it's acceptable. The elements that need further study are, and I do want to leave it at study because I'm sure there's going to be ways that they can, a number of different possible ways of solving it. But the main entrance, the gable and the chamfer of the pilasters above the Capitol needs to be reworked or resolved in a different way. The depth of wall needs to be appropriately deep as shown on elevations and not in the plan. The termination of the wall at the ground needs to be resolved where the weep screed is. And I think that's all on the east elevation, and then and the rest of the building. But and then on the west elevation, if we can go back. The west elevation, if the gable roof is to be kept, then the whole wall should be extended forward. What would we say, at least a foot?
Even 4 inches would be sufficient.
Let's give a minimum.
Shadow.
Okay, 4 inches, at least a minimum of 4 inches, let's say, to break the plane of the back of the west wall. And the window should be studied preferable taller on the west elevation.
Yes.
And I guess we should start with, in general, the commission is in favor of the project and likes the way in which the design direction is going.
Yes.
And then we also require a computer simulation of the simulation building, just so that we can have one. I'm just kidding.
Oh, Mr. Chair.
All right, we don't require that, but yes, Commissioner House or Vice Chair House.
Prepared to make a motion. I'm just curious whether the applicant would prefer 2 weeks or an indefinite. Because I would say that this could return next time for PDA.
Pilar, may I ask?
Yeah, so through the chair to Commissioner House, we're currently going through application completeness review for this project. So I don't know whether or not it's going to be complete within 2 weeks. I would say an indefinite, and we'll be happy to schedule it, once it's deemed complete for HLC project design approval and final approval. I would ask, do you want it to return to the full commission, or is consent appropriate?
I think consent would be appropriate. Well, I don't know.
No, I'd like to.
The consent, Commissioner Mahan, who does consent, is not attending this meeting, so he will at best just read our comments. Well, he could review the tape of it, but.
Well, why don't we do it back to the whole commission? It's coming back for design approval, so, and they'll end up coming in final as well. So maybe it'll be design approval, and then we'll kick it on to final for consent or something like that.
Easy. Okay, so my motion is for an indefinite continuance and to be scheduled for project design approval.
Second.
With the comments
All
that
right.
were made.
I think I heard Drury say second.
Finally.
So we'll go, and then under discussion, would you add to that motion an item I forgot, which was the landscape is acceptable as proposed?
Yes, that is acceptable.
Okay. Okay. So, and the seconder, Commissioner Drury?
Yes.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So with those comments, we'll now, any other discussion? All right, let's call the vote. Roll call, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll begin the roll call vote. Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenvik,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
Chair Grumbine.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So there's no appeal period, so I think that's it. So are we done?
Thank you for your time.
Before 5
There we go.
o'clock. All right.
Oh,
Great,
excellent.
2 weeks until next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
The meeting is adjourned.